Welcome to episode 40-something of Lift Talk. 44, thanks Chris, of Lift Talk. I'm here with Matty B. Today we're doing the APA Nationals, or is it the APU? No, it's the APA. It's APA 2025 Nationals preview show. So we're going to go through all the weight classes. Not a good joke. Crickets. We're going to go through all the weight classes. We're going to go through who we think's likely for podium and different medals and go through some of the possible scenarios, go through some of the recent training that we've seen and all of the likes. Before we get to that, Matty, what are we looking forward to at Nats?
Well, I think one of the first things I wanted to mention was to reflect on last year's sort of pod about nationals and how excited we were, but also in anticipation for this and some of the stuff that's eventuated that I was hoping for then, which is that we've seen an accumulation of more talent in APA. We've seen the growth of APA. We've seen awesome events. And now we get to go over to Perth and experience the other side of the country. A lot of the East Coast people, obviously West Coast people, always come to us. But I think that's going to be really awesome. That's one thing I'm really looking forward to. I've never been over there. I think a lot of Aussies would be saying the same thing. So that's going to be really cool. I think the event's going to be great. Jacob's going to put on a mad show. And I think that there's... honestly, the more I see the posts going out on the socials, the more I'm like, wow, the majority of the classes are really hot, which is obviously something I'm excited for. That's what most people look forward to at a national event is the battles, who's going to actually take the placings despite what training has looked like. So all the normal stuff, but it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I think because of the time period that we've had for planning for this nationals as opposed to last nationals, I think everything from who's turning up to compete, from the venue to the way it's going to be run, is all just going to be up a level this year. And like you said, Jacob's going to do an awesome job with it. It's in a hotel right next to the beach in like a good area in Perth. Yeah, exciting stuff.
And that's saying a lot because last year's was so good.
Yeah, it was. It was
so
awesome.
I know as well, like a lot of the streaming stuff is going to be even better. I know Chris is doing a lot with that, and he's even getting people along to like man different cameras and moving cameras so that he can kind of handle some of the improvements that he's made to the streaming stuff. So I think every element, there's been a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes. I think there's a lot of improvement, and that's all we want to see in the sport is gradual improvement, each year. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But yeah, there's certain classes that I think are going to be particularly phenomenal, unprecedented, and I think we'll chat through those. But yeah, I've also been around a lot of the competitors out at Breakthrough, so it's been just a fun vibe prepping as well, being amongst that. So yeah, I think there's heaps to look forward to.
I think last year as well, there was like an added element of, sort of the first real big nationals, because 2023 there wasn't one. 2022 it was kind of a bit disjointed. There was a lot of people who I didn't know, and now we've had them compete at nationals. We've had sort of them in our eyesight for the whole year after that. We can now kind of have a better idea of everyone.
Yeah, and I also feel like we had like SBD Cup, Australia Cup, which was, I guess, another high performance insight to like, okay, who's here, right? So I think there's that as well, because people can sort of fly under the radar, and people still have done that, at the local level and whatnot. But when you have a big event like that outside of nationals, I think that also gives you good insight into where are people that they actually push themselves. Because once again, people can kind of come in and do like a seconds sort of day in their locals to qualify or not do one at all. But big events like that, I think, also push people to kind of showcase where they're at. And we definitely saw that.
And also with the increasing in the qualifying totals, people have had to push harder at those qualifiers.
That's 100%.
We also had
right?
Night of Champions, where there was a few lifters who will go over, who will be competing, and then the Perth Cup as well. So it's like we had those three meets around the same sort of 3 or 4 week period, which highlight a lot of the people that we're going to see here. I don't think anyone is going to be able to fly under the radar like they did last year. Yeah. Like we saw Sam Forsberg, nominated with like in the 760s and came and won with 822 with the huge jump on his last deadlift to win. We saw Ebony in the 69s win. We barely even talked about her in the pre-show, which is obviously our mistake. Hopefully we don't do that again this year and actually miss anyone who could be a contender. But I think because of the visibility of everyone and the sort of like togetherness of the federation, I don't think it's as easy to sort of go missed and fly under the radar like that.
Whilst that's true, I think the nature of it is that you would say exactly this when missing someone who's flying under the radar.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So
Totally.
we'll try our best as we always do. But if we miss you and you know you're flying under the radar, cool. See you at Nats. It's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm
You know?
really, really excited. All right, so we'll duck right into the weight classes. We'll start with the 47 kilo class in the females. We only have one lifter. I think she might win. It's Vicky K. Nominated total 393.5. Most recent total 406, weighing about a kilo above the class at the SBD Cup. You're obviously privy to her training out at Breakthrough, as you alluded to earlier. Can you give some more insights into that? Obviously, she had a fantastic day at SBD Cup, which was like almost like her redemption. Has she been looking sort of on par with that, or has she exceeded that prep?
I think that the way she's looked, to my perception, has been like best I've seen her, for sure, since she started training at Breakthrough, which is like a year and a half now at least. And I think that the mindset coming into this comp is a healthy one, in that, you know, the nominated total is the 393, which is last year's nationals, I'm pretty sure.
That's right.
And then obviously most of us know that Vicky bombed at Worlds due to elbow depth,
Don't say the B word.
and then went up a class for SBD Cup or Australia Cup. What's the best term for that? SBD Cup?
SBD Australia Cup.
SBD Australia Cup. And I think that was a really nice momentum builder. And then the purpose, and I mean, there is a luxury in a sense of being the only lifter, but let's be real, even if there are other lifters, you know, Vicky's extremely strong, and she's going to be a favorite regardless. But I think the purpose, what I'm getting at, is, I know from conversations with Vicky, the purpose here is to be a momentum builder to doing something great on the world level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what we'll see is a priority on making lifts, a priority on hitting, you know, PR single lifts at that body weight, PR total perhaps. But compared to the previous prep, she looks easily as strong, you know, but obviously she'll be at the correct weight for 47. I know she's actually made some really solid headway with her top end deadlifts. She has expressed like this experience of, for rep work, sort of finding her groove rather well, but sometimes it feeling really sticky for singles and not really being able to find or realize how to make those singles move a little better. And then recently, like I'm literally talking in the last 3-4 weeks, she seems to have really figured out how to make those singles move appropriately to what you would expect from some of her rep work. Like, you know, she might hit like a 160, 165 single and it'd be rather hard, and then do like 150 for like 6 and it's just easy, you know, that kind of contrast. But now you're seeing there's like 160s, 165s, like moving appropriately. So I'm pretty interested and quite excited to see that deadlift and how that shows up.
Yeah,
But no, she's had a great prep. She's looked really good. She's been healthy. Again, she's had previous preps where she's had like groin stuff or adductor stuff. She hasn't commented on anything like that, and she's usually pretty open about it within the BT community. So I think she's looking as good as she's ever looked at 47, and I'm really excited to see what she can do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's a chance to beat everyone on good lift points.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously lifting at the start of the week is the biggest disadvantage for that. You know, we could see Nat, Lucy, some of the men who are lifting after her see her score and try and beat it. But I think, you know, her deadlift, just talk on her deadlift, like her deadlift has improved every single comp, the last 3 comps, like you said. And if she can just continue chipping away at that, that's going to actually give her a chance to get a medal at Worlds, which is ideally the scenario for her.
Yep.
And that's what she cares about more than this one. I think, you know, like you said, this one will be get in, clean day, 9 for 9, you know, maybe a PR total, maybe match what she did at SBD Cup.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Maybe do a little bit more. Like I can see 405 to 410 for her, being a good, obviously she would need to go 9 for 9 for that, but being a good day. And yeah, really excited to watch Vicky, and I reckon she'll win. Is she your 16 points for fantasy?
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
And
so.
the last thing I'll say as well is I think her squat in training has looked the most consistent that I've ever seen it look. You know, like in previous preps, I've seen like some weeks where things look rather easy, and then some weeks where it seems to sharply get more difficult, and then kind of goes back and forth. But really, any squat that I've seen her hit, between about that 135 to 140 mark in training, which she's hit quite a few, has looked pretty comfortable. So I wouldn't be surprised if, she's capable of like the mid 140 to maybe upper 140 region, but hits like a low to mid 140 and just looks nice doing it. I would think that's probably not a bad tactic. And then again, if she's able to get up towards that 150 at the international level, I think that would be remarkable. So I think this is something that, we sometimes talk about as coaches, about creating like a pathway for performance and a pathway for progression, especially because she's in that situation she's in with being the only lifter there. The necessity to redline it is probably quite low, or the
risk there's also zero, but the need for it is also zero.
That's right. And also it's about that long-term mindset, which she definitely has, which is about creating momentum for the more important competitions, which she can call nationals a low priority meet, really. And so I think that's potentially something that we might see. I'm interested to see what the game plan is, right? The other thing too is like, as a lighter weight lifter, like having a hard day, I mean, like it's, like you said, little to no risk, beyond it being like there's no one there to sort of beat her, but also just in terms of like the recovery post-meet, should be fine. But even just mentally, just like knocking on from the next meet to the next meet and being like, I had more, and progressing. Like we know that's a thing.
Yeah. Like if she squats a nice 142.5 or a 145 and knows she had 2.5 to 5 in the tank, she knows that with her current strength level, she has a little bit more. So she can extrapolate that out into worlds.
It leaks into
perhaps
better training.
Be a little bit more aggressive with the attempt selection
but
at
even
worlds.
leaks into just like better training. You don't have to like put pressure on yourself to make silly choices in training. And you just kind of roll on. So I think there's something to that.
Yeah, it's like this is working. Let's just keep doing
something
it.
to that. Yeah. So
all right, that's probably enough on Vicky.
Yeah.
Now we'll move on to the men's side, 59 kilo class. We have 3 competitors. We've got Jonas, we've got Kyohi, and we've got Daniel. Now, I'm going to call Kyohi K because that's what he likes to be called, and it's much easier for us. So Jonas is nominated with 560, and the other 2 boys are nominated with 532.5. How do you see this one playing out, Maddie?
Well, I think based on the nominations, there's a pretty big gap there between Jonas and the other 2 lads. So my expectation would be that if Jonas can come in and execute a good day, which, his last comp was an 8 for 9. Prior to that, he hit a 6 for 9, but then, his third last comp was another 8 for 9. So he's shown that he is able to come in and execute when he needs to. And I think that, if his training has been sound, if he's, in that sort of ballpark that he nominated at, I see that as a pretty hard game to lose. And I guess it just comes down to priorities there. Is this a meet where he wants to push? Is this a comp where he's far enough ahead that he decides to be aggressive? And if he does that, is there a chance that one of the other guys could actually do well enough to close that gap? That's a question. But I think that's an unlikely scenario when you see this sort of like 27.5 kilo gap in this weight class. Yep. That's a pretty substantial.
Yeah, that's 3 attempts. That's not 1.
That's it. So I think that my summary there would be that it's Jonas's to lose, and that if he just comes in and focuses on having a clean day, we should see a good performance there from him.
Yeah. I totally agree there.
But then the second, third battle is kind of more the conversation.
Yeah, exactly right. And both guys coming in with the same nominated total. Quite similar lift proportions, with Daniel being the bigger deadlifter, which makes for an exciting competition because it's pretty simple. It's like if Kay can build the subtotal enough, deadlift enough, and push Daniel enough to the point where he misses, then great, he'll be the silver medalist. But if he misses a lift, or maybe if he's too conservative and Daniel also has a great day, it's within striking distance for him. And that's really like the funnest scenario in powerlifting. It's like, the pressure's on one guy at the start of the comp, and then all of a sudden the pressure shifts to the other guy, which I really love. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this. It's cool to have competition in some of these weight classes that aren't usually populated. Last year we had similar, actually. We had 4 guys vying for 3 podium spots, and it was quite close in the end, with the winner, Dion, not coming this year. I don't know why he's not coming. Would have been cool to see Dion and Jonas go head to head.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be cool to see Kay and Daniel battle for that silver medal. My money is usually on the bigger deadlifter at the end because you get the say. So that's kind of where my prediction would be. But we'll see if Kay can do enough to hold off Dan.
Yeah, no, as well, I think that if you look through the sort of made lifts that these 2 have had in the past, like Daniel has had 1 shocker 3 comps ago with a 4 for 9, but since then has done 7 and 8 for 9. So you would expect that, you know, there's been some lessons learned from there. They've got coming with a sound game plan. And again, like you said, having that slight advantage at the end of the day, being able to pick precisely. You know, we talk about this a lot. What is that advantage, you know, from your perspective? Not only are you able to pick, you know, later, but why do you sort of lean more towards that bigger deadlifter? Speak to that.
Because you get to sit back and you get to pick the exact number that you need, and the ball is in your court, and it's a very simple decision. Whereas the lifter going first has a tougher decision to make. Do they play it conservative and perhaps, you know, not do enough? Do they go more moderate and maybe stretch them? Do they go aggressive and maybe miss? And there's pressure on that coaching scenario, and then there's pressure on that lifter, because you're essentially pulling for the win before the person gets a chance. So there's the pressure on that lifter first, but there's no certainty in it.
Certainty.
Whereas the final person, the person going last, if it's like, hey, Dan, you need, what's he done? If you need 232.5 kilos to win, that's it. You win. Whereas if you say to Kay,
second,
to a second,
win that battle.
Yeah. But if you say to Kay, all right, you out and pull 222.5, and maybe you win, or we go 225 and you have a slightly better chance of winning, but also a slightly worse chance of making that lift, it becomes a bit more of a confusing decision.
Yeah. I think that when it's this close on total, that perhaps if the coach and athlete can bring that dynamic away from analyzing what's needed for this and what's needed for that, if they can actually hit a deadlift that's pretty well top end, that's certainty, right? That's certainty of like the outcome.
It's certainty for you've given yourself the best chance, but that's not certainty for the outcome.
No. In terms of the outcome that you could have achieved, you know, because I guess that's the annoying part. I think as, you know, a lifter who
subtotal specialist.
Yeah. Like from my perspective, like I, as someone who squats what they deadlift pretty much, or more than what they deadlift. When you encounter those scenarios, the most frustrating thing is what you just spoke to is if you deadlift something where you have like 10 kilos in the tank. So let's even talk about like just briefly tangent, like Tom Chaplin last year deadlifting something that had a lot of room.
Rand.
That can be quite frustrating, and But Rand's like someone who generally has that last say, right? But in that situation, say for like Tom, where he pulled something that was like way too light, he would have come off probably going, oh, shit, I mean,
should have done more, yeah.
I had more, right? And that's frustrating. And then the other thing that's frustrating is what you just said as well, is like when you go too far thinking you need to push that person and you just miss, you know? So that certainty element, I think, is a big one, because you can also just do it with like no regrets. You go, okay, well, this is what I need. It's a priority. I need no more, no less. This is exactly it.
Exactly
Bang.
right.
You know, and that's quite a nice situation. But I think my advice to those who don't have the last say is not to worry about it, and actually to put up what you would consider to be like that formidable total that is the best you can do, and that at the end of the day is certainty to your outcome. And then if you get beaten, that's okay. Don't beat yourself. Don't go out of pocket, miss, and just completely ruin your chances. Put a total up that needs to be beaten. I think that's the best thing someone can do who doesn't have the final say.
It's a 9 for 9 game.
Yep.
What's the best total you can get after 9 lifts?
Yep.
For the other guy, it's a 6 for 6 game, and then we wait and see.
Yep. I think it's semantics. I was thinking about this earlier today, and we always say it's a 9 for 9 game. It's a make your thirds game. You know, like I think things can happen throughout the day, and you can go 7 for 9 or 8 for 9 because like you got called on depth on your opener, and you still kind of add kilos, right? It's a make your thirds.
9 for 9.
It's a make your thirds game, you know, and I think that's what should be prioritized, because we always speak to this. The odds are, especially at national level competitions where the standards are higher. And standards are higher, and it's not a purposeful thing that standards are higher. It's just a reality that you have like more experienced referees who have had more time in the game. It can be more objective and whatnot. And then as well, the pressure of the event. There's a bit of travel this time. You know, it's not crazy, but I mean, it's Australia. It's still some solid travel across the country. What is the flight time to Perth?
Is it 5 hours?
Something like that.
I think it's 5.
Yeah. And there's a tiny time difference.
3 hour time difference, yeah.
Shouldn't be a crazy thing, but there's all these little factors, you know, that come in at nationals. So, yeah, look, I think it's going to be a great battle. I think what will happen is that second, third battle will probably keep those guys away from Jonas, because we tend to see when people are close, rather than aggressive attempt selections, we tend to see slightly more conservative attempt selections to make lifts and to build out the total. So we might even see like those nominated totals be about like the total that comes second, you know, even though there might be progress made by those two lads. there's going to be maybe that slight conservative approach, and the person who loses of those two is one that goes more aggressive and misses an attempt or something like that.
Yep.
Who knows? But that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think it's a pretty straightforward weight class.
Yeah. All right. Good luck to those boys. We'll move on to the 52 kilo women. We have got 9 lifters: Liz, Zin, Kate, Ainsley, Kaina, Valentina, Jackie, Emma, and Vinny. So 9 lifters in this class. I've listed them in nominated total order. And I think there's a pretty clear top 4 here, which I don't see anyone below Ainsley getting onto the podium just because of the gap between Ainsley and the next person is 25 kilos. And as we spoke on with the 59 class, these smaller weight classes, that amount of load to add onto a total is obviously quite large. And even if someone has a very bad day, it's still quite hard to make up 25 kilos. So I guess we'll focus the conversation on those 4. So first nominated is Liz Craven, coached by me, and she is nominated with 410.5, which is what she did at SPD Australia Cup. It was an 8 for 9 day. She missed her second squat on depth and came back and got it. Since that comp, we've swapped to heels, and she's been undeniable on depth, been absolutely burying her squats. So I've got no reservations at all with her missing any squats on depth this time. She has squatted 147.5 in training. She's got her final heavy squat tomorrow. Be looking about 150, maybe a smidge more. The squat record is 148. So I think we'll have Liz, Kate, and Ainsley all looking around about the squat record or to try and chip it, which will be an interesting sort of subplot on its own. Liz bench 82.5 at SPD Cup. It was quite easy, and she has done 85 a couple times in prep, so we'll be targeting that. She deadlifted 183 at SPD Cup. She did 185 yesterday. So Liz is looking really good. If she squats 150 tomorrow, that'll put her at 420 for this week, which I personally think will be pretty hard to beat. Obviously, I'm biased, so you can talk on that if you like.
No, I think that's a pretty fair analysis. Even considering that on nominations, we're talking already, almost 15 kilos and then really good progress since then.
Yeah.
And a mislift on technicality that was retaken. There's a lot there that suggests that it's going to be a bit more than 410. And really, if she came in and did 410 again, she'd be a good pick.
Yeah.
Still.
It was also her first comp as a 52 in about 4 years. So she didn't do her whole prep at 52 kilos body weight. She was kind of dieting until about 4 weeks out, and then was kind of 53 for that last little push. Whereas she's been sort of in that 53 to 54 range this entire prep.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I attribute the progress to, is having more food, more fuel availability for training, more fuel availability for recovery and that kind of stuff. And obviously great coaching.
How do we feel about the next 3? Because there's actually quite a tight cohort in there to sort of battle it out, most likely for that second place position.
Yeah, so I also coach Zin now, actually, since SPD Cup I've taken over Zin's training. She has some issues with depth on squats. She missed 2 squats at her last 2 comps on depth. So we've been working hard on that. And I think she'll be around what she did at SPD Cup, plus or minus 2.5 kilos. The bench has been going well. I would expect a PR there, and deadlift I would also expect to be around what she did at SPD Cup. So I think a small total PR for Zin, 400 kilos would be great. Maybe a tiny little bit more than that would be additional, would be extra. But I don't think we'll see her push sort of towards that 410 range. Whereas I do think Kate and Ainsley can kind of make some progress from their nominated totals based on what I've seen. Ainsley had a fantastic performance at her qualifier, 9 for 9 day with 387.5. And I know she's squatted above the national record in training. So I would expect her to try and maximize kilos on the squat, as that's like her biggest advantage, given she's, out of the 4 of them, the weakest deadlifter. And Kate didn't have a great day at SPD Cup. She missed her final squat and bench press, which were both actually quite big jumps. She jumped from 142.5 to 150.5, and she jumped from 80 to 85 on bench. So she left quite a few kilos on the table there. and she did get her last deadlift, which was a grinder, but she's also swapped to sumo as well this prep. So we could see a nice improvement on the deadlift there as well. So I do expect Ainsley and Kate to be knocking on the door of 400, 405
lots
as
going on
well.
there. I feel like I also heard that Kate might have come into SPD Australia Cup with an injury.
She did. She had like a hamstring tendinopathy.
That's right.
And that's part of the reason why she swapped to sumo.
Yep.
And it seems like it's going better for the injury, but we'll see how the performance is swapping stances.
Yep. No, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, from what you explained there, I mean, it's good to get insights there, someone who coaches two of these lifters. But it sounds really like there's going to be a clash at about that 400, and it's going to be down to the wire who's able to claim that second place.
And Zin's the biggest deadlifter of the three. So, you know, we will probably just load what is needed for the silver if it's within reason. Or maybe we load what's for bronze if that's, you know,
if that's
more
unreasonable.
likely.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll be able to have the final say there.
That's the other thing as well, is like there's going to be this big clash, and then someone is going to be knocked off the podium in the process.
Yeah. So yeah, exciting class. For the records, so the bench won't be touched because Vicky broke the bench, and
Vicky.
no one else is close to that 91 kilo bench.
Yep.
But like I mentioned earlier, there's 3 of the women who are going to be vying for that squat record or right around it. So Liz, Kate, and Ainsley will be right near that squat record.
And then Zin for the dead.
And Zin and Liz for the dead. So yeah, that will be interesting to see how that all plays out. I'm picking Liz, staying strong with picking Liz.
Yeah, that's right, because I totally just overlooked that there's only half a kilo difference between the nominated deadlifts between Liz and Zin.
Yeah, so Liz broke the deadlift record, and then Zin came and got it right away.
Yep.
60 seconds later at SPD Cup.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
How has the deadlift prep been for Liz?
Great. She did 185 yesterday.
Awesome.
She did 180, and it was like a little bit nonchalant. She sent it to me. I just happened to be on my phone. She's like, should I stay here or should I go up? And I'm like, man, it didn't even look like you really tried on that. Like, give it a bit of oomph.
Yeah.
She came in, she like, you know, gave us, she said some words of encouragement that were not very kind to herself, like calling herself a C word.
You dog.
And came in and did 185 better than the 180, just with a bit more, with a bit more juice behind it.
I feel like we see that a lot from Liz as someone who's such a good competitor, that she has this real ability to rise, which I guess is something you need to manage within training and make sure you're at the right place to perform when it matters. But that's something I've really noticed with Liz, which I really love about watching her compete, is like you can see when needed, her load something, especially on the deadlift, where you go, really? And then you see her come out and she like smokes it and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
She
like,
almost seems to get better as the load goes up sometimes.
Can do, yeah. And I think that's really just speaks to like her experience, but also just like how her like emotional state plays into her performance, which is just a unique thing about her.
Yeah,
you know?
so
So it's great to watch.
She had some issues like sort of overbalancing a little bit, which bit her in the ass at Masters Nationals. She actually missed her last attempt. She kind of got up easily, and then sort of bobbled at the top. So we've been kind of working on her secondary days with like sort of just slowing down the lockout a little bit and making it a bit more methodical, a bit more like controlled. And then she was kind of being a little bit too controlled on the main day, and I was like, no, now it's time to actually unleash. And she's got that extra gear. So
that's great.
Yeah, Liz will be fun to watch. Always fun to watch.
Cool. So plenty of records in this class. Tight battle there. Potentially, you know, a battle for first, depending how performances go, but likely a front runner and then a battle for second.
Yep.
And we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, some really strong ladies here ready to get after it.
Yeah, super keen for that one.
Yep.
Good luck to all the 52 women.
Yes.
Next up, this is probably, in my opinion, the hardest one to pick. And I still don't know who I'm going to pick for fantasy. It's the 66 kilo men.
Yeah, this is going to be, I mean, there are a few battles like this, but this is a particularly anticipated battle between Chris Yip, Andrew Trio, and Yuki Kashima, with a nominated 647.5 from Chris, a nominated 624.
Sorry, it's 642.
642, I was going to say, it looks a bit different.
Big typo.
642 from Andrew, and then 638.5 for Yuki.
Yeah, it's only 9 kilos separating the three of them.
Yep. And we're talking a 9 for 9 performance for Chris there with the 647, an 8 for 9 performance for Andrew with the 642, and a 7 for 9 performance for Yuki with the 638. So I'll just address that first, because that's an interesting insight, you know, initially, is that we are talking about effectively a perfect day there for Chris, and some kilos that were left on the table in increasing amounts you would expect, which sort of begins to, allude to what we're talking about, that if you sort of align like those perfect days for those 3 nominated totals, you're probably talking a very similar total.
Yeah, and if to talk on that further, Andrew's missed lift was a 2.5 increase on bench at SPD Cup. Yuki actually missed his first 2 bench presses at Nationals.
That's right.
Went up 2.5 for God knows what reason and was able to get it. So I think it was from 158 to 160.5.
Yep.
And was able to get it on his final. Let's start with Yuki. I've been watching a lot of his training. I don't know if you've kept up with it.
I've watched it a little bit. Yeah.
He squatted 237.5 last night.
Was 237, 235?
It was 237.5.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that was last night. So that's above the record, which is 234.5, which is Andrew's record.
Yep.
He has benched 170 a few times.
Did a triple at 170.
Did he really?
Mm-hmm.
Goodness me.
Yep.
And his deadlift looks to be sort of a little bit below what he's done, but obviously deadlift's the one that can kind of
Show up on
progress
the
the most or show up the most on the day.
Yep.
So he's looking the strongest that he has. And I think, as always for Yuki, it's been about execution.
Yes.
We just mentioned that at last year's Nationals missing 2 bench press attempts.
Do you know why he missed those?
I actually just don't think they moved off his chest. And I think for him, it's because he's so like pinpoint
Precise.
accurate and precise with his leg drive, his arch, his setup, and everything is touch point, all of it, that if he misses by a millimeter either way, it can be impossible.
Yeah.
At Worlds, he missed a squat on depth, and then I think he missed a bench press attempt. So for Yuki, it's going to be, can he get his squats to comp depth? He does look on the line a lot of the time, or maybe just there. And the bench press, sometimes the butt comes up, sometimes he's borderline on the depth.
Yep.
So those are a couple of things to look for. Deadlift technically is actually fine.
Yep.
But it will be, can he make 6 lifts or 5 lifts at the start of the comp, not leak too many kilos, put up the biggest subtotal he can, and then hold off Andrew and Chris on deadlift?
Yeah, my sort of insights to what players we're sort of dealing with across these 3 is we have Yuki, who's a weapon, but as you just alluded to,
A little bit erratic.
things have to align. Things really have to align for that ideal total, and it can. But there's obviously odds there, and I think there's more tumultuous odds for him than the other 2 in terms of that technical element, which is not really like a dig or anything negative. It's just facts of his technique. Like you said, he's got this huge bench press which relies on those technical elements. It's very normal, especially in this weight class. And then you have Chris, who has the biggest nominated total of all, but must perform on his deadlift for that to happen. That's something that's really important to
He's
note.
kind of got all of his eggs in one basket.
They are. And that's something that I think is important to note about like your quote-unquote deadlift hero, is that if that lift doesn't show up, they're nowhere near.
You got no chance.
They're nowhere near. And then you have Andrew, who's definitely the most balanced. And I think as well, there's not as much of that like technical / performance variability that occurs. And I definitely see that in his training as well. So I think that's kind of like how I look at these 3. And because of that, I give Andrew really good odds. I think that if Chris's deadlift shows up, and I expect it to, that he will load for the win. And that's what's going to be really exciting. I think regardless, he'll load for the win. And what it relies on for him is that he has produced probably just a slight improvement on his subtotal. I don't think I've seen any of his training. I'm not sure if he really posts a lot of it.
No, I've seen none.
Yeah. So, I think I would expect that, he's going to hit about the same subtotal, maybe, a little increase on one or the other of the lifts. And then to be able to deadlift something a little bit bigger than last time will put him in great stead. I know that Andrew has had a really good prep. So I'm expecting him to come in and like bulldoze the day from perspective of like his own performances. And I think that's what we've sort of commented on before, is that for one reason or another, as the standards rise, as qualifying totals rise, as more players come in, you see them just step up in front of your eyes. It really, really happens. And it's so funny. Like I walk into the gym most days for the last like 4 or 5 weeks, and Andrew just like pulls out his phone to like show me a video.
It's his top set.
And I'm like, yeah. And then I'll watch like the first rep and I'm like, nice. And he's like, keep watching.
I do 5.
And there's like another like 2 reps that come out of it. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, so he's done some pretty cool stuff this prep. But I do think that it could be anyone's game.
Yeah.
It's like very hard to say because I think it's just more than other circumstances going to matter very much how these 3 turn up,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, I think to talk on like the kind of players they are, there's also 3 completely different personalities that come out as well.
Goodness.
So like
totally different
Chris is
personalities.
like deadpan, chill,
Yeah,
completely
pretty introverted
nonchalant.
Guy, like
He's so chill. Like
Yeah.
it looks like he doesn't care, even though he very clearly does
he
care.
absolutely does.
He comes out, he's just so chill.
Yep.
Just gets after it.
Yep.
Andrew is like a military robot who is like just precision, execute, like gets on, does his business, walks off. And then there's Yuki, who's a bit eccentric. He carries on a bit. He likes to hype up the crowd.
Yep.
He's got sort of a bit more of an out there personality. He likes to talk shit.
Yep.
And it's just going to be so funny to see these 3 completely different people, battle it out. Like it's they couldn't be more different.
Yep.
I think I definitely agree with what you said. Like Yuki's gonna have to turn up and execute on the day. Like it's gonna have to be a great day for Yuki to hold the other 2 off. I also think Andrew's deadlift has progressed a lot, but not shown up on the platform yet. Like he did that 262.5 at SPD Cup, which was really nice, but he didn't like kind of push the envelope a little bit. So it will be interesting to see whether he does look at 270 or 272.5 or even more than that.
Like you alluded to, his training looks like that's there, but it's a reality of what's there on the day.
Because he pulled for the win to beat Yuki at last year's Nationals, it was 260. And then he did 262.5 at SPD Cup, and it looked a lot easier than the 260. And I remember at the time, I was like, oh, yeah, that 260 was like pretty maximal. And you said to me, like, nah, he's got more than that. Like, that wasn't even hard for him. So it'll be interesting to see, like, how close to the line he's willing to go to hold off Chris as far as he can.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like, okay, Yuki's put the ball this far away. Andrew has to just beat that. Or whether it's Andrew has to beat that and then also extend a little bit further to beat Chris. It's like those kind of calculations.
That's going to be the question.
Yeah. Is it like,
Who do
okay,
you
we
focus on?
just beat Yuki and then we make Chris beat us, or we beat Yuki and we extend Chris a little extra and, you know, maybe push him too far.
Yeah, that's what it's going to come down to. And that comes back to the conversation we had before about who has that decision of certainty. But I would say that Andrew's individual lifts are all looking stronger than they've looked in previous preps, all 3. There's been a lot of like PRs in the doubles, which has been, I think, a different strategy, maybe. I haven't seen him do a lot of like heavier doubles in the past, but he said like heavy deadlift doubles, heavy squat doubles. And then his singles are performing on the bench press really, really well. So like I said, I would expect him to come in and have a really good day across all 3. I think he's going to have a big pull in the tank if you think it's needed. And I think that's just, I feel like it's likely going to be a scenario where he focuses on Chris because I think his priority is going to be the win and he's going to want to protect that from all directions. So I think taking something more conservative on the 3rd to go ahead, say, of Yuki and leaving that open, I just don't see that as a risk he'll take because I think he's going to have cartridges there on the deadlift, you know? So, but it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I think like what we will see in this battle is Yuki's 3rd deadlift will put him in first. Andrew's 3rd deadlift attempt will project to put him in first, whether he makes or not. That's another story. And then Chris, same thing. So we'll kind of see each of them have their chance to like go into the lead and whether they can hold it or not. Yep. Another thing on Chris is the most recent comp he did was his first at 66 in a long while. Previously, his last 2 comps, he was 76 and 75 body weight, and he totaled 705 and 700 at those body weights, and saw quite a drop in the squat in particular. I squatted 232.5 at both of those meets, and only did 210 at 66. So I'll be looking at that. If Chris can squat 220, then I think he's going to be really, really hard to beat.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
If he can get some of those kilos that he's lost from dropping back down, if he can get those back, perhaps it's similar to what we mentioned with Liz earlier, is doing the whole prep at the same body weight. Obviously a bit shorter prep because he did Perth Cup, which was in November. So only a 3-month period. But if he can get some of those kilos back from training at that body weight and fueling himself and stuff, then I think it'll be pretty hard to beat if he squats 220.
I think 220, yeah. One is a big ask because I think his 210 was pretty tough work at his comp. And the other thing about these lads is they're pretty tall guys for 66ers on average. Like they're not really tiny dudes. So when it comes to the leverage of something like a squat for a 66 and progressing that from a 210 to a 220 after dropping down, I think that's a big work. But in saying that, you know, like you mentioned, settling into the weight class can be really positive. It can also do the opposite. You know, you can, kind of retain some of that strength from being heavier for a period of time and then time that comp really well. For all we know, he might be having a hard time producing a 210 squat again. So there's a lot of ways it could go. But I agree. If he goes 220, definitely makes it much more difficult, like any added kilos. But 220 would make it much more difficult for the others because he's got that big deadlift. Because I think that it would be silly not to expect that it was possible he could pull around 310, you know? So adding 10 kilos on the squat would definitely put the pressure on the other two to produce something special to push him out. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to comment without seeing really any of his training because he could be having an amazing prep. He could be having a terrible prep on one lift. He could be, you never know. So
I think because the meet was so recent that it's kind of safe to assume he's in the ballpark.
At least around the same place. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely agree. Yeah.
All right, that is the 66 class.
Yeah,
we should also mention the boys that we didn't mention, Ezra, Shun, and Vin, all nominated with 565.
This is kind of like the secondary battle.
Yeah, and something that I really like about this Nationals, and you'll see this in almost every class, is that there's like a grouping below sort of the contenders or the podium that are going to be like fighting for 4th, 5th, 6th.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's more to Nationals than going to Nationals and trying to win or get a medal. Like, you know, placing as high as you can. You know, if you say you came 5th in Australia, like that's an achievement. And I think we'll see a lot of those sort of secondary battles taking place. And this is one of them between Ezra, Shun, and Vin.
Yep.
And that will be cool to watch. All right, moving on. 57 kilo women. We've got 6 lifters: Kirsty, Cindy, Samantha, Alicia, Justine, and Sophia. I've highlighted 4 as potential podium candidates. So we've got Kirsty nominated 412.5, Cindy nominated 397.5, Samantha 387.5, and Alicia 382.5. So kind of similar to the 52 class where we've got 1 who's nominated quite a little bit in front and then 3 who are a bit below. But it's a bit different in this circumstance because I think the 3 who are below are actually a real shot at the win. Like I think all 4 of these women could win. And I think this is going to be a super, super close one. Do you have any further insights, Maddie?
I have obviously seen a lot of Kirsty's training, but a little bit less than usual because she actually trains a little bit earlier in the day now. So I'm more often like saying hi, she's leaving. But from what I've seen, she looks strong. So I would expect her to put up a good day. Mm-hmm. Cindy, I've seen a fair bit of her training. MD strength, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Cindy's had what looks like
squatted 170.
Looks like an amazing prep. I think she did 430.
Did a
435 that day.
Yeah.
170, 95, 170.
Yeah.
And the squat was incredible. The bench press was a short pause. The deadlift probably wasn't quite locked out. It was a pretty tough day, but it was much higher than 397.5.
Yeah. Huge progress has been made there for sure.
So there's big moves there. And I'm very excited to see that play out. I'm pretty sure Cindy's a junior. And
she's just dropped down from the 63 class.
Yeah.
So her last comp, she did 407, which was as a 63 with 2 missed lifts. She's come down to 57. Not sure how long ago that 57 qualified comp was. So how long she's had to settle into being that body weight. I also don't know how heavy she was when she did that 435 in training. Like she could have been sitting at 60. She could also have been 57. Like that's not information that we have. So it'll be interesting to see how she turns up. Obviously, Kirsty being the bigger deadlifter out of all of these women, best of 192.5, which is the current Australian record. So I assume what we're going to see here is her having the final say at the end. Now, Samantha is a really interesting one because she's just come back from having a kid. So I'm pretty sure their son is like a little bit older than Milo. I think he's about 18 months old. And she's making incredible progress. Obviously, you know, it's so hard after pregnancy and early motherhood to train and get all that stuff done. And now sort of a lot of that is out of the way for her and she's kind of more quote unquote back to normal. So we could see a lot of improvement there from Samantha, which is obviously would be awesome to see as well.
What have you seen from her in terms of training?
I haven't seen her training. I do not follow her. But she did really well at her last comp. And her comp before that was 20 kilos more. So I think like getting back to that pre-pregnancy sort of level for her gives her a real shot at the win. You know, she did 407 that previous comp, 387 at this one, and did have a good day. I think she just missed her last deadlift. So I would be almost guaranteeing over 400 for her.
Because I know you mentioned at the start you could potentially see any of these ladies winning. How about Alicia?
So what I can see from just looking at her progress is that there is steady progress. So she's gone from 357 to 367 to 382.5. And that biggest total there was the only one where she missed a lift. So she's 26 out of 27 made lifts the last 3 comps, with the biggest total being the day where she did miss a lift. So, you know, if we can extrapolate that out, we can see that improvement coming. I project that she'll be close to 400 as well. So I think we'll see the top 4 here close to or above 400
in
kilos.
A pretty tight ballpark.
And they'll be quite closely grouped. And like we spoke about earlier with the 59 class, is that it's going to come down to made lifts. If you go 6 for 9, you're probably going to if you're in this group of 4 and you go 6 for 9, you're probably going to come 4th. If you go 8 for 9, 9 for 9, you give yourself a real chance at that podium. You give yourself a real chance at that gold medal. And then as I alluded to earlier, Kirsty being the bigger deadlifter, the current deadlift record holder, she'll have the ability to chip at the end to pull exactly what she needs to win, or, you know, maybe not even need a chip to pull for the win. But yeah, that is actually, to talk on Kirsty, I did invite her to SPD Cup. She said no because she was a bit burnt out. Have you spoken to her recently about sort of her like mental load, her trajectory and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we spoke a bit when she just made that decision, and I really supported that. Like, just from my perspective, I was like, that's a great choice. Obviously they'd thought about it a lot, and I think that that's something that lifters, you know, don't necessarily have a knack for before they need it. So I think the fact that she was able to call that out, and just, she was just saying like, she just wanted to be able to just plug away at training, make some progress, make sure she was enjoying herself, make sure the body felt healthy. And I mean, she's pretty quiet, keeps to herself, you know, comes in, trains hard. So, you know, we talk a little bit, but, you know, she keeps to herself a lot during her training. So I don't often go over and try to get into the nitty gritty. I let her sort of do a thing. But she's looked like she's been really enjoying herself. She's been as consistent as ever. She's looked really strong. So my hope is that has worked out for her. I haven't like directly asked if she's felt less burnt out now, but I think that even addressing that is a positive thing. And I think you can do so much for lifter performance, because I think there's this like top sliver of performance when you're a high performer that comes from where your mental state is, you know? So she could turn up any day and do that sort of like 390 ballpark. But, you know, to hit that 410 to 420 mark, she needs to be mentally really sharp, happy, switched on, and have had this really momentum-filled prep. So hopefully she's had that. She looks to have had that. But yeah, that's kind of my wrap on like how much I know about it. I know that we chatted a lot on it when she initially made the call, and she seemed very at ease, you know, about the decision, and very happy with the decision. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah,
This is a really interesting one, because we've got sort of Kirsty and Cindy, who have previously competed at Nationals and previously competed at Worlds. Sydney was the 63 junior representative at Worlds last year. Kirsty went to Worlds as a 57. She came second at Nationals last year, pulling 192.5 to take the second away from Kelly on the final deadlift. So we've got like these two lifters at the top who are very, very experienced, and would, you know, I'd give them a high likelihood of executing well. And then we've got these kind of two sort of lesser known lifters who could come in and do amazingly, just, you know, for Sam bouncing back from the baby and just, you know, getting back to where she was before. And Alicia just continuing that steady progress that she has made. So it's going to be an interesting battle, and another really hard one to pick. This is one of the like 5 or 6 that I haven't actually decided who I'm going to pick for the win yet. I haven't filled out my fantasy yet. I'm going to do it tonight, probably after chatting it out with you. I'll make my decision.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones as well where I think that the curveball here is probably Cindy. Just because of the training boom, it's one of those things where you go, can she pull this off in training? Is this actually really realistic? Because if she just like thumped with fatigue, is she pushing really hard and she's actually going to come in and be able to do this kind of thing on the day when she's even feeling a bit fresher? Or is she training a bit heavy, so therefore things are a bit inflated, and then she's going to cut weight and it's going to be a little bit lower than that, and she's going to kind of fall in the middle of what she's done in training and what she's done before, which would make it a really interesting situation. Because I think there's some potential there that if Cindy comes through with those kinds of numbers, that she just wins.
Agreed.
You know?
Totally.
There's that potential there that exists. But I think that would not be something that I would just be like hanging my hat on. I think it's just a possibility because of what we've seen in training. Because at the end of the day, right, I think people are quick to be like, oh, but it's just training, you know? It's like she did it. Like she lifted the numbers, you know?
But then there's the other side of the coin where people are like, well, she did this in training, therefore she has to do an extra 2% on a comp because of taper, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, you get these like
other ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, you get these skewed viewpoints.
I think like
you and I both sit somewhere in the middle. It's like a bit of column A, a bit of column B.
Yeah,
you need a bit more context to understand which side of it's on.
I think like if we give her the benefit of the doubt and she's training within a reasonable window of body weight, so within 1 kilo to 2 kilos of competition weight, which is not difficult to manage and then get back to that weight by the time you're competing, I think that those numbers are pretty reasonable. Because the only one that I felt was a bit iffy was the deadlift, and if you come in a little bit fresher, I think that could probably just put the icing on that. So I think that there's some high potential there that we see that kind of ballpark total, which would be awesome.
And also, was that all on the same day?
Great question. Can't recall.
I think it was, and
recall.
I think it was like a full SPD day where she would have done squat sets and bench sets after those top sets. So I'm kind of thinking like that deadlift is probably the one that takes the bigger improvement, and the other two kind of maybe fall back a little bit.
If that's true, yes. I can't recall exactly, but I mean,
and we tend to see that as well. That the squat, because of the refereeing, tends to dip a little bit below what people have done maximally in training. Bench press as well, with the strictness of the start and the press commands. And maybe elbow depth. I think she was sweet on elbow depth.
Pretty cool on elbow depth,
those might dip a little bit. So, we might see 165 and 92, and then we might see 180 or 175 on deadlift, which is a little bit more than what she's done there. So, again, I agree. Cindy could come in and just blitz everyone and be way out of reach for Kirsty to pull for the win. And then we could have this little secondary battle for second place.
Yep.
Or we could see her take a little bit of a hit because of those things that you mentioned. And then, everyone ends up being a little bit more closely bunched.
My expectation, as like a bit of a realist, is that it's going to be a really tight battle between Kirsty and Cindy.
Yeah.
That's my expectation.
I'm sort of tossing up between those two at the moment. And like I said, I still don't know who I'm going to pick.
Yep. Okay. And then also to mention Justine and Sophia, again, really cool that we have two lifters really around the same nominated total, which gives you that sort of secondary battle. So keen to see how that plays out as well. And that is our 657 kilo lifters.
It is also worth noting Teresa Tang pulled out a couple of weeks ago.
That was very disappointing.
I think she would have,
for her and for everyone.
Yeah, she would have been probably the hot favorite. We also had Sarah Toohill, who I think she did 407.5 recently at the Alpha meet. She just didn't sign up for life reasons. She would have been a good one to have in here as well. So I just thought it was worth mentioning those two. Hopefully we can get them both in the mix with all of the rest of these ladies next year.
Goodness me, imagine those two in there as well. The whole thing would just be completely shaken up from top to bottom again,
And I'm trying to convince Zin to go up. So we'll see.
Oh, cool. 57s, nice one.
Yep. Good luck to all the 57 women. Next up, we have the 74 kilo men. Worth noting, someone is not here. Stephen Day, not here. He's in England now, so he's not doing nationals. So we've got 8 lifters. We've got Leo, Kian, Thomas, Danny, Zane, Alan, Zach, and Julian. And we've got 3 sort of sitting above the rest here for that podium. By quite a margin. So Tom, 702.5, Kian, 713, Leo 736.5, and then the fourth place nominee is 662.5. So big gap, 50 kilo gap between third and fourth nominated here. So we'll focus on the top three here. You take this one away, Maddie.
Yes, I mean, we start with Leo. Leo's a very battle-tested lifter. He's got a lot of experience nationally and internationally. He's also just an incredibly to standards lifter on average. I think that he hit the first... I feel like he hit the first 10 times body weight total.
He did, yeah. I think that was
a little while ago.
4 years ago or something now, yeah.
So, he's been strong for a long time. And there's some merit to that in terms of producing outcomes at the top end and how likely that is. So I think I give him a very high likelihood of coming in and performing.
There's like this buffer for someone who, I mean, we'll talk about that with other classes later, but when people go on these huge trajectories, there's not much to fall back on. But if you've been at this certain level, it's very robust. It's very predictable as well.
To that point, though, his latest performance being a 6 for 9 was a 722.5. It's kind of to that point, right? It's still an extremely strong total, above everyone else's nominated total on a 6 for 9 day. And something I'll say, I think I spotted him at last Nationals, is he's got like this incredible technical rhythm and consistency. His opener, his second, his third, it's all like exactly the same.
Yeah, he's robotic.
From like the bobbles, like he walks out his squat and then he just sort of sits and like the weight just kind of bounces a bit. It's like the same number of bounces every time, and like it's so methodical.
The Roger Federer of powerlifting.
Not even funny. And I think that's just the kind of lifter that he is. He's very precise. I know with the way he posts about his coaching, he's very like data and evidence driven. I think that's the way he functions, and you can really see that in his lifting. And I think that that methodical approach bodes very well for a 74 kilo lifter that, is evidenced by his performances. So I think he's going to come in and do an extremely good total. I hope that we can see something more like that 735 to 745 realm. I think that would be remarkable to see. And I think that would make it really hard for the other two to have a go. I think when I look at Kian, he has such huge potential to come in and have a strong day and have a really amazing day. I think that we just haven't really seen that from him on the platform. So 6 for 9 at the last comp, 6 for 9 at the comp before that, and then 7 for 9 before that. And I think that the 6 for 9, which that must have been the Nationals performance, the 713, was where we were like, whoa, look at this guy, right? Because it was 713 up from 675. But yet, he fell very short, clearly, of his own expectations, having missed 3 lifts. So what are we missing here? What's happening in training that looks like such great potential? And if he can string that together, are we going to see those 3 attempts after 713 be made? And we're looking at 2 guys going 735, 740, right? But I think, again, from a probability standpoint, the way I've just laid all that out is the evidence would say Leo will do that. And the evidence would say that Kian could do that. That's kind of where I sit on that.
That's right, yeah. And to talk on Kian as well, like his last 3 comps, he's only made 4 out of 9 deadlifts, which I think is really important because it's going to come down to deadlifts towards the end for that silver medal or that gold medal perhaps. And he hasn't shown an ability to, whether it's grip or whether it's, timing or lockout issues or whatever, he hasn't shown an ability to lock in the kilos that he thinks he has or he is capable of, maybe in training or maybe what his training projects out. So that will be really interesting to see if he can get on top of whatever deadlift funk he's in on competition day.
But it might also be a factor of the plan. Like a deadlift funk can look like a problem with deadlifts when it's really just too heavy for the context of the day. Because again, we see people approach their training in a myriad of different ways. Some people will, create these like ideal circumstances for one lift or the other because it is like maybe their funk lift and okay, I'm going to make my deadlifts feel amazing in the prep. Doesn't matter what you do, it's the last one you do on the day. So you cannot negotiate that. There's always going to be those trickle-on effects from your squat and your bench press and just the entirety of the day. And some people legitimately don't get affected by that for one reason or another. Maybe that's how they always train. Maybe the leverage is lent that way, whatever it might be. Maybe they fuel better throughout the day. Maybe a combination of all those factors. But if you find that you're consistently falling short of your expectations on the lift, the plan might save that. And it might actually provide you those extra 5 to 12.5 kilos on your total, which is all that matters, rather than getting too hung up on, oh, well, I deadlifted this in competition. In training, I need to replicate that in competition. If it's not happening, if you're continuing to miss lifts, I'd love to see a cleanup of that, whether it's technical, whether it's the funk element and, executing, or whether it's just a better plan that creates the platform to execute better.
Yeah. So of those, to talk further on it, 4 out of 9 at the last 3 comps. One of those days he made 1. 2 of those days he made 1, and one of those days he made 2. On both of the days where he made 1, he actually went up to his 3rd attempt, which would kind of tell me that it's probably a technical thing. But again, it needs to be addressed, and it probably needs to be like baked into the plan that those technical things may arise, which means we pull down the targets a little bit. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see if Kian can execute. And then 3rd nominated is Thomas Del Rosario, nominated with 7:02.5. Did that recently at the Perth Cup, 9 for 9 day. He's been looking really, really good in his training.
Is Thomas the one that trains at X Gym?
Yes, coached by Dave.
Yeah, I think I saw him pull 300 pretty cruisy the other day.
He's been looking really, really good. And I think what we're actually going to see here is Kian is going to go after Leo and forget about Thomas, and then Thomas is going to pip Kian. That is kind of my prediction here, is that we have Leo 1, Thomas 2, Kian 3. And Thomas has a 9 for 9. Leo has a good day. Kian kind of tries to chase Leo and falls short and leaves the door open for Thomas. That's my reading on what's going to happen here.
I can definitely see a lot of doors hanging open for that to happen. Yeah, I can definitely see that being a possibility. And I think that the only thing that I would like to see as an alternative to that would be, for Kian's deadlift to just show up in even moderately, even just from an attempts made point of view, and for it not to be a situation necessarily where it's like what you outlined there, like Leo having a good day, essentially, Kian kind of missing and reaching, but maybe like 3 sound days and maybe a particularly good day from Thomas where it becomes that battle for second, and Leo's just maybe kicked it too far down the road for that to be considered. And the other 2 are actually having a good quality tussle. I'd like to see that.
That's what I would like to see too. Yeah,
and I could see that happening as well. I think it just depends on the mindset of Kian and whoever's coaching Kian on the day, and whether it's that at all costs mindset, and they believe that the prep has been strong enough that they can go in with the mindset of we will load whatever it takes, which means, you fall far from there if you do, or whether it becomes a shift of priorities. Okay, Leo's too far ahead. Let's focus on this 2nd place.
And I think what these guys do have sort of a positive at their disposal in this particular battle is there's only 3 of them. So if you do push for first, you still get a medal. You're not like ending up finishing 6th or something like that and, not getting on the podium. So I think like in that respect, it may actually be worth it for Kian to reach. But I guess we will see. I really like all 3 of these guys as well. They're great dudes. So I want to see them all do well. I want to see them all execute. Would love to see 9 for 9 from all 3 of them, and, like important deadlifts made at the end for particular placings and shiftings in placings at the end. And that's what makes for really great powerlifting.
100%. And then we have Danny, Zane, and Alan, who are sort of wrapped up around the same total, this sort of like high 650s, 660 situation. And then we've got Zach and Julian, 637 and 617. I know Zach has had a better prep than some of his recent ones. He's looking much better, looking strong. Danny trains at Breakthrough. He's been doing really, really well. He's had a couple of like muscle strains throughout the prep here and there, but he's managed them really well. And I think you see that in people who've been in the game for long enough. They can have these little strains or these little ailments that happen throughout preps, and they kind of just take it on and keep moving forward and figure out a way to make it work. So I think he's done well.
Yeah, Danny's an interesting one because his 662.5, he missed 2 deadlifts. And also since that competition, he has improved a lot on his bench press. I haven't seen heaps of his squatting. I don't know if that's what you're alluding to with some of the little like muscle niggles.
No, not even. Like I know he had like a bit of an adductor thing that just didn't bother anything. He just kind of dealt with it really well.
Just there, yeah.
And then he had a bit of a pec thing recently that he also just seems like it's not really going to bother him too much. He benched 190, I think. It was probably not to comp standards in terms of the pause length, but it was really nice. And I don't know what his do you know what his competition PR is on bench press? That would be a huge increase on where he's been before. But yeah, he's looked really good. And even in the prep where he I think dropped 2 deadlifts at Adonis. I think that was when we were at Power Pals. He'd had a really good prep on grip and he'd had a really good prep overall. So I think that was a bit of a head scratcher for him.
Yeah, so the best bench 167.5.
Yeah,
So
wow.
you know, we'll probably look for like plus 12 on top of that.
Yeah, I would expect him to hit in the 180s.
And the record is Stevens, which is, let me just pull up my notes, is 176.5. So I expect Danny will take that bench press record. And I think if we add that much to Danny's bench and he makes his like one of those 2 deadlifts, like we're looking at 690 for Danny with no improvement in squat and no improvement in deadlift.
Yeah. Could be a little bit of a dark horse.
Maybe he could be a smoky for the podium.
Yeah.
I think the fact that his deadlift is the weaker of those, well, the weakest of sort of, if you include him in the top 4 of those 4, gives him a bit of a disadvantage because he'll pull first. But yeah, maybe we are overlooking Danny by not putting all of his comp details in here. But yeah, definitely a smoky.
I think yeah, it's good to note. His training's definitely been high quality, and I think it will depend on pulling off the deadlifts, and then secondly, how much of a progression we make compared from that 167 to 190. It's a big space. Where's he going to fall? Is he going to do 190? Is he going to do 180? That's a big difference. So I think it's going to matter what happens there. And even if you're going to squat something similar or a little bit more, I haven't been with him for a lot of his squats this prep, been around him for a lot of his benches and deadlifts and things. But when I have seen him squat, he's looked quite good. You know, I haven't sort of looked at it and gone, oh, something's wrong here, or that he looks absurdly more strong. He looks to be doing quite well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think for Danny also, he's gone up to the 74 class from the 66 pretty recently. So we could also just be seeing like, you know, that strength like potentiate across that class, like across the history of that class.
One thing I'll say is Danny's so jacked.
Yeah, he's super jacked.
He's so jacked. I look at him, I'm like, how are you a 74?
How are you a 66?
Yeah, but like at the moment, how are you a 74?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good luck to all of the 74 men. Moving on to the 63 kilo women.
Oofed.
Now this is going to be fun. We've got 4 lifters who are sort of above the pack here.
Yeah.
In particular, 3 who are above the pack. I've included Kelly because she's recently gone up to 63. She's nominated at 412.5 on a 7 for 9 day. That was last year's nationals where she was bronze medalist in the 57.
And her trainings look good.
Her training has looked good.
Yep.
She's gone up a class. She looks to have put on some nice amount of tissue and looks to be strong. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like 450 from her. So I wanted to include her in this, although her nominated is quite a little bit below.
Yeah, she's
Kathleen.
definitely in the race in general. And then I think that it begins to become more of a 2-horse race for first, is how I see it.
Yes, agreed.
And I think that it's another situation not too dissimilar to the Cindy situation, where we have Abby Wallace, who's on paper, you would go, well, she doesn't look that close to Shay. But I think in terms of the training performances we've seen from her, that I think she's shared very tactically that we will definitely have, if she's able to produce those kinds of training performances in competition, we're going to have a genuine battle up around that 500 kilo mark.
Yes.
Is what I'm expecting.
Yeah. And I was talking to her coach yesterday and he was telling me that like it was kind of a rare opportunity to be able to hide training because she's a little bit behind Shay. And, you know, he didn't want to show the cards too much. First of all, before we get into more specifics, what are our thoughts on hiding training?
See, I think we differ quite a lot on this. You hate it. You think it's really lame.
I hate it.
And I think that if it serves the lifter, I love it.
Agreed.
Okay.
If it serves the lifter, I love it, but I don't think it provides a tactical like coaching advantage. which I think
No.
Which
So,
I think is that I think that is what is considered to be like the
Okay,
biggest
so-
pro for it.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm so anti it.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that like what a lot of okay, I agree with you on that element of it. If you think that hiding your training is going to mean that when you lodge your openers and start going through your firsts and seconds 10 minutes apart from each other, and then your seconds to thirds in front of everyone's eyes, that everyone's going to go, oh, whoa,
Oh, that's different to my scouting report.
Like, you're absolutely kidding yourself. Everyone's watching the scoreboard. Everyone can see what's going on. Everyone can watch the lifters and how easy the opener is. And most versed coaches know what's coming. Now, there are some outliers with that situation. We know what happened last year in the 105s.
Yes.
Was that a perfect storm of events? 100%. If some of those other lifters had taken their, top ends for, say, the deadlift, would we have seen that same outcome? Maybe not, right? So was it a product of hiding training? To some degree, there was an element of contribution there that hoodwinked, someone and hoodwinked some people into making certain choices. So I think that's why I say that if it benefits the lifter, from a tactical perspective of just counting people out, that can literally make some coaches not write the name down on their processes.
Yes.
And I think that's what happened with Forsberg.
Yes,
I
agreed.
think people just didn't write that shit down.
Yeah.
Because it was like this. We've got our colors of who's in contention, and then like your Dannies, we're out of it. And it's like, okay, well, that's exactly why people hide training.
Yeah, what if Danny's put 60 kilos in his
So
total
I
and we've
don't
just
think-
missed him?
I don't think it's meaningless, and I don't think it's unhelpful in cases where someone has made extremely good progress, and in cases where maybe certain lifts have made extremely good progress more than others, where it's going to be like, okay, this person has 30 more on their deadlift than we expected. That completely changes the tactic, because some people do also drop their openers on a deadlift to just trace other lifters and do what's needed, and that might be an error if you're actually scouting incorrectly. So I don't mind it. And then the last thing I'll say as well is, if it gives the lifter a mental edge, that they feel like they're a dark horse and they feel like they're flying under the radar, that can contribute to better training. That can contribute to a ferocity in training. So I think that there's something to that. Personally, I've done both. I've hidden training coming into competitions when I've had tight competition, and I've shown it all. I do think that depending on the personality, showing all of your training can show confidence and to show you're excellent. And then hiding all of your training can also be a show of confidence. And then the complete reverse. Hiding all of your training can mean you're really scared and you want to just kind of be that dark horse like villain. But I think in a lot of cases where someone is very strong and has had a really good prep, hiding training adds to that confidence. It's like, here I come. I'm not even going to show you what's going on. And then I want to bust it out at the competition and kind of show everyone what's going on. Because it's got that little bit of drama to it as well, which is kind of fun.
I think in Abby's case, a lot of people posted in my questions box yesterday being like, Abby's a dark horse. I just don't think she's a dark horse at all. I think everyone is expecting her to come in with a fucking killer performance and put up something very, very close to Shay. Like, I don't think
people overuse dark horse.
Yeah, I don't think she's even remotely close to a dark horse. In this scenario, her hiding her training, I don't think is giving her a tactical advantage. But as you mentioned, if it is allowing her to be free without pressure, without sort of this battle hanging over her head of like, oh, Shay posted her training, I better post my training. Although Shay hasn't really been posting much of her training either.
But it may not even be that.
Yeah, I don't think it helps tactically. I don't think it helps with coaches pre-planning attempts and everything like that. But if it allows you to be free and train and stay focused and locked in, by all means.
100%. And I think that it wouldn't even necessarily have to be that it alleviates pressure. For some people, they do it because it applies pressure. It's a way of them creating their own story, creating their own arc, if you will, And I think people can go a little far with that sometimes, but I think for a lot of people, it's very helpful. And yeah, it's not going to give them a tactical advantage. Everyone's talking about Abby, so it's not like a surprise. Yeah. And that's what a dark horse really is. It's that situation where no one spoke about them. They're that smoky where no one spoke about them. They have made immense progress, and everyone in the room is surprised when they make the attempts that they make on the platform. It's like, what is happening here? And we're not going to experience that. But she is a new horse in the sense of the race.
Yeah.
Right. So she's a newcomer to that standard of lifting and has found herself there quite quite a quick kind of fashion.
Yeah.
You know,
I think
relatively.
what's also exciting about this is Shay's been mostly uncontested for a while now. And I think this kind of adds an element to the 63s that we haven't seen in a while, because it's
agree.
been like, oh, you know, if we had fantasy last year, it'd be like, Shay, 16 points. Like, but now it's like, ooh, can Shay do enough? How much stronger is Abby? I think Abby's posted enough of her training, like even 7-8 weeks ago. She did 175 for 3 squat or something like that. Did a 110 for 3 bench set.
170 for 6 deadlift.
Yeah, like some crazy sets she's posted. Like the cards are all out there. Everyone knows she's fucking strong.
She's done. The thing is, that's crazy. Is I've been on a close friend story, and she's done way nuttier stuff than that.
Yeah, and like I think we all saw the trajectory of it, and it's like, all right, like this is gonna be a fun battle.
If you know powerlifting, you can watch those things and you know what's happening next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we haven't actually mentioned the 8 women who are doing the 63s yet. We got sidetracked. Yep. So we've got in nominated total order: Shay, Abby, Kathleen, Kelly, Angelica, Sophie, Therese, and Pavina. So as I mentioned earlier, 4 women I think in contention for the podium: Shay, Abby, Kathleen, and Kelly. We should talk a little bit about Shay. She has that sort of consistent base of strength that she has had for a long time, which I think is reliable. And I think I'd be very surprised if she didn't do 500 kilos or very, very close to 500 kilos. Like I think she's at that level. I think she's been... she hasn't competed since last national. She decided not to do World. She decided not to do SPD Cup because she wanted to put all of her eggs into this nationals basket. And I think we will see a really, really impressive performance from Shay. I'm actually going to be helping her out on the day, which I'm really excited to do. I've got to organize a call with Jason and her to go over the game plan, which I'm excited to see what the numbers are looking like. And then obviously we've spoken about Abby. Her nominated total is 455 only, which I say only because she's going to be looking at that 500 kilo mark as well. Where I think Shay has the advantage is I think Shay will pull last. Yep. And I think Abby will probably have a lead on subtotal, and it will again come down to whether Abby can push Shay far enough on that final deadlift.
Thing as well, even just like from a stats perspective, the likelihood of someone who's at 455 hitting 500 their first try versus someone who's been kind of like around the 480s for a little while hitting that 500. I think from an odds perspective, I'd give it to Shay, even though I know Abby is looking really, really strong. It doesn't mean that Abby cannot.
That's how I feel as well.
She likely will. But if you had to kind of crunch it down and, you know, in the reality, when things kind of shake out, just how it tends to go down is it's more rare to see that sort of occur. However, that would be a lot of fun to watch if it did, you know. So I actually hope that they both end up right around that 500 and it's a pull for the win and it's made or not. I think that's going to be like the ideal scenario from a spectator's point of view. And to kind of fuel that idea of like the narratives and the storylines coming in, meaning something. Otherwise, it's just a bit of like, you know, smoke up the bum. This like doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, I think it's going to be really good. I think I want to quickly speak on Kathleen as well. So Begs is an awesome lifter. She is incredibly consistent. She's the only one who's a 9 for 9 for the last 3 competitions of this cohort, of this top cohort anyways, which I think is a really important thing to note in terms of our expectations for her. So 445 in the last comp, 432 before that, and 432 before that again. So good progress into the latest one. And I think that there's been a relatively recent coach change. I think she's with Dave. So hopefully that has been a fruitful process and she's been able to sit into some really good training. And we can expect, you know, some solid progress there, maybe something similar to the relative performance increase from the last competition. And of course, we expect her to make lifts. So I think that it'll be interesting to see if there is a tussle for third, you know, with that slight improvement there from Begsy, and then Kelly perhaps actually showcasing that really good day and getting into the middle of the 400s. I'd like to see that secondary battle, but it may end up being a battle for first and a given, you know, third place medal and then, you know, fourth. I don't know how it's going to play out, but that's how I'd like to see it play out. And like again, I always look at it in like, what would I like to watch, you know? So that's what I'd like to see. And then we have Angelica, Sophie, and Therese, who are, you know, I guess more so Sophie 3 Sempovina are bundled around that 370, 380 mark, and then Angelica kind of out there in the middle with 397. But once again, I think that we can only speculate if someone like Angelica has made some really great progress, like we talked about Danny, could she bump up and challenge Kelly? That's always a question. We don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah. I think to talk on Beggs, her last comp is her biggest total, 445, but she actually didn't hit a single individual lift PR in that meet. She squatted and benched just below her best, and deadlifted equal to her best, and was able to put that day together nicely. I'm excited to see if she's able to sort of like extend her best on all three and then bump the total up quite significantly in doing so. And I think that's actually quite likely. I've been watching her training pretty closely. She's looked good. Like you said, very consistent. She executes, she makes lifts, and she's really, really fun to watch. She's got a lot of ball of energy about her, which I love.
Yeah, she's cool.
And yeah, as you mentioned with Kelly, like going up a weight class, we expect to see like a nice bump in progress. I know she was quite tall for the 57s, and she had quite a tough time like getting down there and staying down at 57. So I think it will be nice for her just feeling more comfortable and training just without, such a limit to calories and stuff like that.
Yep.
So yeah, I expect to see Kelly and Beggsy sort of in that 450 to 460 range.
Yep. No, that'd be awesome.
So good luck to all the 63 kilo women.
Super exciting class.
We'll do one more and then we'll take a break because that will be halfway.
Yep.
So the 83 kilo men. So we have 15 lifters in the 83 men, which is the second biggest class after the 93s, which is 17. I'm going to read out all the boys first before we dive into more specifics. So we've got Nathan, Kana, James, Emilio, Kevin, Ian, Aiden, Bren, Nicholas, Atisha, Joey, Kakoa, Nissan, Raz, and Dimitri. So that's our 15 83 kilo men. I've highlighted 8 who have a chance at the podium. So very, very deep, high-level class here. And I think it is 2 guys vying for first and then 6 guys vying for third, which I think is going to make for a really, really interesting battle. How do you want to go about doing this one?
How do you want to chop this up?
Because there's a lot to talk about here. We might do 30 minutes on the 83s.
Let's talk about the 3rd to 8th place guys.
Okay, yep.
And then we can finish with the top 2. And I think we can maybe even just start by addressing that Nicholas, Tish, and Joey and Kakoa are all around sort of that ballpark of just under this group. And then we've got Nissan, Raz, Dimitri. I know Raz has been calling out winning the B group.
Yeah.
It's been his...
He also did not have a good day to hit 652.5.
Yep.
So he could very easily be 680.
Yep. I think, again, in this sort of area, you're going to have a lot of progress. I think that a lot of these 9th to 15th nominated lifters are going to get up around that 700 mark. I know that's my goal with Tish, who's one of my lifters. So I think, we're going to see a lot of awesome movement where we could have, 13 guys go over 700 in the 83s, which would be cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So, good luck to all those lads in the nominated 9th to 15th. When we look at the, let's say, nominated totals for that sort of 3rd place contest, that's a big thing to say with a 50 kilo spread, nearly 50 kilo spread. Why do you think that they could all, or what's like your thinking behind commenting that you think they could all be potential 3rd places?
Well, I think James Lee's the highest of this group, and I think he's probably the one who is going to fall down the most from nominated total. He's kind of been injured. He did 707.5 at SBD Cup after doing 753 at Nationals, which was, he did miss a huge jump on his final deadlift, which obviously took a lot of kilos away from that total. But he's been injured. He's been away. I don't really know how seriously he's taking this prep. You could probably talk on that, given you see him a bit more at Breakthrough.
I think he always takes his prep seriously. He's definitely had a little bit of an injury experience for the last little while, and he came into SPD Australia Cup with injury. I think he was actually pretty pleasantly surprised with how he performed, even though he hit only 707. He had a lot of room. I think, again, that was just like a pleasant surprise. So, in saying that, he's also been away for a little while. He's still been training and everything, but like he doesn't post, and like I haven't seen much of him, so I can't really speak too much to it.
I think
but it wouldn't surprise me to see him get fairly close to his best.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that. I think like that 750 is probably where I see roughly third place falling. It might be a little bit more than that. There's a couple of boys who have made a lot of progress in this group as well. Like Emilio, we can talk about Emilio. His last 3 comps have been 747, 750, and 745. And I know he went into that last one with some knee niggles, which I know have been a little better this prep, but still bothering him a bit.
Yeah.
He's just super consistently around that same mark. So it's hard to say he's going to do heaps less than that. He probably does around about 750. Like I think that's quite a consistent mark for Emilio. Kevin Lee is the one who I think could like excel past that 750 of this group if he has a great day. He did 735 with the 6 for 9 day, which like was pretty close to actually what he had on the day. Like he missed a 5 kilo jump on squat and bench, and I think he missed a 12.5 on deadlift, but it didn't leave the floor. So like it wasn't too far away from what his potential has been, but this prep he's taken it up a gear.
Sure.
And particularly the bench and the deadlift have looked like they've just shot up, you know, a few percent. So I think we will see 750 plus from Kevin as well. Then got Ian Burns, who is 730 nominated. His previous total, he did 710. He took a 25 kilo jump on his final squat and missed, which shows me that there's a lot of confidence that squat's improved. And maybe we'll see like sort of mid 270s there. It looked to me like he sandbagged that deadlift as well. So, you know, he's sort of been up around 300 and he's a bit below that at that comp. So I would expect Ian to have made progress too. I would expect somewhere in the 740s for Ian as well.
Yep.
Then we've got Potsy, Aiden Potts, nominated with 712, and that is not even remotely a reflection of how strong he is. His last 3 comps, 712, 708, 712. I know that he'll be looking into the high 700s. His squat is markedly better than the 260 he's got nominated. His bench is a bit better than the 147 he's got nominated. You probably expect middle 150s. And his deadlift is a shit ton better than the 305 nominated. So wouldn't surprise me at all if Potsy did 750, 760 as well. And then finally, Bren nominated at 707. Was that the... Hang on a second. That was the recent comp he did at Perth Cup where he missed 2 deadlifts. So that was at 707. The previous comp before that was APU States where he totaled 720. And he also missed a 15 kilo jump on his final deadlift, which would have given him 735. So he's also in the mix for that sort of. And I've been following Bren's training quite closely as well. His bench looks like it's going really well. He's worked very hard on getting his squat up, which has kind of been the limiter for him. And the deadlift it looks like his grip strength is improving, which has kind of let him down a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if he did 750 as well. So, you know, we mentioned that sort of next group of guys, sort of maybe 5 or 6 of them being able to get close to 700.
Yep.
This group might be all 5 or 6 of them getting 750, which is fucking exciting. And it's going to make for some really interesting attempt selections towards the end. It's going to make for some really interesting tactics, and it's going to make for some really high pressure lifting from all these guys to you know, win a medal.
Yeah. Obviously, you know, Emilio and Aiden a bit in the driver's seat towards the end with the bigger deadlifts.
And Kevin as well. Kevin will probably be, I think he did a 305 double this week, so I probably projected he'll be in the 320s.
Might be around the same spot.
And I think Potsy, like, fuck, who knows what the limit is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing with Potsy is that at least with the track record that we have in front of us here, there's been a lot of training potential that hasn't come into fruition on the platform. But at some point it will.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, is this the competition where we see him hit what he's able to hit and what we've seen him hit in training? I know that this is his first comp with Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've had a lot of time to kind of test theories and, you know, see if they can improve, I guess, the robustness of his performance, because that's what I would describe it as, is like a bit finicky, where he hasn't been able to produce the same things that he expects to produce. But I think that in terms of potential, he'd be him and Kevin are probably one of the bigger in terms of potential if everything was to strike perfectly. So, yeah, I think this battle is going to be very cool. I can't imagine that any of those lifters are aiming to tussle with the top two. I can't imagine that that's the case, but, could be wrong. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the top two, Tanis nominated 800, Kana nominated 792.5. Almost 40 kilos between second and third here. It would take a mammoth effort for one of those boys sort of in that 3 to 8 range to do about 780. And I think it would be a pretty bad day for Tanis or Kana if they only did 780. So that's kind of where I see it. Maybe one of them misses weight. Maybe one of them bombs. We don't know. Like anything can happen in sport.
That's extenuating. But outside of that stuff happening.
Outside of that stuff, if we look at the track record of Kana, 8 for 9, 9 for 9, 8 for 9 his last 3 meets. Tanis 9 for 9 his last comp. He's the most experienced of this entire group. Been competing since 2014, same year that I started competing. I remember him as a 74 junior when I was a 74 junior. He's been around. He's been in high pressure situations. He's competed internationally. He's done several nationals, done several expo comps. He's not going to fumble and go 5 for 9. Like I just don't see it happening.
No.
Kana's not going to fumble and go 5 for 9. Just don't see it happening. So I do think that those two are too far ahead of this next group.
Even with the nominated totals, let alone what they've added to that.
And then we can talk about the improvement they've made.
Yep.
I've been privy to Kana's training, obviously given he trains here.
Tanis has been pretty open with his training.
Yeah, Tanis has been posting his training very openly. I think the big thing for Tanis has been the improvement on his bench. 167 at his last meet. He has done 170 as a 93 in the past, but that 167 was an 83 kilo PR. I think he's done 175 in training and it moved.
Moved nice.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we see 180. Wouldn't be surprised if it's 177.
Yeah, I think we'll probably see 175, 177, just knowing Tanis.
Yep.
I think he's going to be very calculated.
He is very, very conservative and calculated.
Yeah.
And that is part of the confidence that I have in none of those other guys catching is because he just makes lifts. And
exactly right.
Kana's the same.
Exactly right. So if we sort of segue into the conversation about these two formidable lifters pushing their way toward, being very internationally competitive.
Probably the two best male lifters in the country.
Yep.
And they just happen to be competing against each other.
Yep, absolutely. So, if we look at, let's say, look at Kana to begin with, I know that there'll be certain things you won't sort of speak on because, again, he doesn't want to expose, I guess, what his training looks like because he's one of those training hiders, is he?
Well, I think he's more like he's just kind of worried about himself. I don't think he really puts thought into that.
I'm just pulling your leg a little bit.
Oh, okay. No, I don't think he really puts too much thought into that. He's just like very focused on what he's doing, and like he's told me that he's seen what Tanis is doing, and he said to me, if I do what I think I can do, I will win. And I'm like, I think that's a great attitude to have. So he's not too fussed about what his attempts are. He's just going to leave it to John. John's going to deal with that.
Let me ask this: if you had to consider what you believe, not what they're actually going to attempt on the day, but the top end strength for all three lifts for all three lifters, based on what you've seen, because you've seen
all three lifters.
Sorry, all three lifts from both lifters.
Yeah.
Because you've seen really all of the important training from Kana. We've all seen majority of Nathan's training. Who do you think is stronger?
I think Nathan is stronger.
Okay.
I do think Nathan will win. I even said that to John last week. He was like, who do you reckon is going to win 83s? And I said, I think Nathan will win.
Because 3 or 4 weeks ago, you were saying Kana. 4 or 5 weeks ago, maybe. You were saying Kana to me. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think that Nathan has shown, he hit a 300 squat double. He hit a 307 that he was unhappy with. He didn't feel good that day, which is hilarious. His bench, like you said, at a minimum, he's probably putting 7.5 on the day where he hit 800. His deadlift was redlined at that 800 for sure. And I think even just replicating something similar to that would be quite impressive. And that's probably where I expect him to be. I think if he had to be pushed out to something like 330, I would give him a good chance. But I think any more than that's probably a bit of a steep ask. But I think that if he's able to put, even just at a very conservative 5 to 7.5 on the squat and the bench press. So let's say 12.5 kilos, and he comes out at something like 812, 815. I think that's going to be, a strong ask for Kana that's probably in his ballpark. But then that's me just saying that I believe that's a minimum expectation that I would expect Tanis to go for. I'm really interested to see his plan. Like, I'm actually asked to see it.
Do you know who's got him on? Who's handling him on the day?
Adjua, his partner.
Oh, cool.
Yep. I'm pretty sure. So I'm really interested to see like what the plan is, because his training's so deceiving in the sense that everyone comments this on his stuff. It's like, bro, that was RPE 7. And he's like, man, I had 5 kilos.
Yeah, it was a 9, yeah.
It's like, bro, I had 5 kilos in the tank. And at some point, like, he's been able to separate between like what is the common perception of his RPEs and whatnot to what he knows he has. And I think that's a great skill that he has. He knows what he has in the tank. He hits lifts. He does all these things. But I'm really interested to see what their plan's going to be, because he's had a huge prep. I think the one that I'm expecting to see the biggest movement on, like bench, he's made great progress, no doubt. The squat, I'm quietly curious. Like, he could come in and squat, like, what did he hit on the 800 day?
305.
305. Like, he could come in and hit like 310. You'd be like, yeah. But I think he could like squat like 320. It's not impossible that he's going to go for something huge like that, because he had plenty of room in the 305. Like, he looked like he could have scored 310 that day. And he has made great progress on his in training performances, whether that means his squat's gotten stronger, whether that means he's just showcased that level of strength more this prep. I don't really know.
I think, and I've been watching Tanis for 10 years. His squats kind of always look the same.
Agreed.
And I have never seen him grind one. And I don't think that we will, if that makes sense. Like, I think he's probably much more likely to attempt 312.5, 315.
I agree.
And
I agree, yeah.
And make it look like the 305 he did, and then come off the platform and go, fuck, that was a good decision. I'm glad I didn't do it anymore.
Yeah, I think probably a better way to frame it is not that he attempts 320 or something like that, but that's where he's like at now, relatively speaking. Like you said, he attempts more that sort of 315. I'd like to see that. I think if he squats 315 and bench presses 177, he makes it extremely hard for Kana.
I think what we see is whatever the gap is on squat, I'd probably be 7.5 to 10. I think we see that same gap on bench press. And then I think we see Kana just not quite do enough on deadlift.
That's probably,
and when I say who's stronger, I mean, I actually think Tanis is about 5 kilos stronger. Like, that's how close I think this is.
Yeah.
Like, I think we see 305 squat from Tanis, 315. Sorry, 305 squat from Kana, 315 from Tanis. We see 177 from Tanis, and we see 187 from Kana. They're literally equal on subtotal.
Yep.
Kana comes out and pulls, 320, 322, and then Tanis wins.
And like, realistically, you can play it however you want, but Tanis could very well trace Kana with that strategy. He could just get ahead the amount that he knows he's going to be behind on bench on squat, and know that he's got the bigger deadlift, and just wait and see what Kana pulls and just pull what he needs. Yeah. Like, that would be a very viable strategy to make sure he doesn't sort of overreach and miss something. And he will have that ability on the squat that he goes after. So there's a lot of stuff that he could kind of like do there, or he could just stay in his own lane and have a great day, and he might do better than we both think. I think Kana hitting what it would take to challenge Tanis, frankly, from my perspective, is a very impressive consideration. And I think that hearing from you how his training has gone, I believe that he's in that realm. But I was expecting him to slow down a little bit more into this competition. So I think he's done better and is going to be more of a contender to Tanis than I originally expected when I saw Tanis hit 800 and then kind of come in and pretty much get 800, but, technicalities. But Tanis definitely looked to me like he had a bit more to give than Kana did. And I think for them to be in a very similar realm, Tanis having had such a good prep as well, is really impressive on Kana's part. Again, the lifts are yet to be made. The plan is a plan. But I think if he's going to fall around that ballpark, I find that very impressive. And I think that, this is the first of many battles for these two. Because I think we've also seen, this is like Tanis' like big return period. Yeah. He's been in the game for a long time. He's been out of the game for a long time. And then he's back in and he's done this historic 800 at 83. And now he's got someone right there who's pushing him, which I think is very healthy for both these guys. And I think it's going to, the whole idea of like the rising tide, brings up all boats. So I think that's going to be really good for both of these lifters, and this is going to be the first of hopefully a lot of like battles for these two.
Yep.
And like we just said, we've also got a number of lifters who are going to go over 700 in the 83s, and quite a few who are also probably going to go over 750. So this whole weight class is moving up really nicely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. If I had to say who I think is going to win, I think it's going to be Tanis. But of course, kind of has it in his cards that if anything doesn't go quite right for Tanis, he's right there within maybe 5 kilos.
Yeah. I also think that Kana, the thing that has progressed the most for him has been his deadlift, which, you know, he pulled 305 last year's Nationals, 315 SPD Cup, and he had room on both days, and he's looking better in training. So I think if there's one time to see and take a risk and like push the envelope a little bit, and maybe he needs to attempt 325 or 327.5, now's the time to do it. And I would love to see that, like him really stretch himself, because he's never done a third deadlift that to me has looked hard. And it will be interesting to see if he's willing to take the risk, or if he's, you know, just going to solidify a total to make Tanis beat him. Or
I think
this
will also be interesting in terms of tactics of attempt selections. I think it'll matter who's ahead after seconds in terms of those selections, because then that person has, I guess, like the power to bluff the third placing placeholder and make the other person go first. Because I think they're going to be close enough that both of them could just like put in some insanely high third and make the other go first, and then just pull what they need. But obviously that's a greater risk for the person who isn't currently in first place. So I think that's probably going to matter a little bit.
You also have 2 changes on deadlift. So if you both go like, if one of you goes ridiculous, the other one can just like go ridiculous after you and then make you change again, and like, you know, you can play like cat and mouse.
The point being that if you do that, and let's say that they put in something ridiculous like 380, the moment that that person walks out for that 380, if they're the person currently in the lead, they've won. That's what I kind of mean.
Yes, of course.
Is that the person who's ahead can bluff, whereas the person who's not ahead has to pick a genuine attempt at some point, otherwise they lose.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's going to matter, and how they strategize the seconds to put themselves ahead. Maybe a heavier second than they might usually take might give them the edge to be able to have that power of picking, and that's going to come down to tactics like that. So I see that as a very important consideration for those who are coaching Tanis and Kana on the day. You know, there's a few ways you can play it.
Yeah, I do expect Kana's seconds to be quite light and take quite big jumps to his thirds. So I would imagine that Tanis is probably ahead. After seconds.
And Kana's going to have to pull what he thinks he can, or, you know, push Tanis as much as possible, and then it'll come down to Tanis.
And I don't think John's the type of guy to put in a bluff and then change and try and trick you or whatever. He'll just be like, I think Kana has 320, I'm going to put in 320.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like, from my perspective, it's not even like a tricking thing. It's a placeholder that's like saying, I'm waiting for you to do your attempt, and, you know, I'm ahead if you are, right? It's just smart.
Yeah.
You know, if you're ahead, there's no need for you to play the game. You know, like what you risk if you're ahead and you put in something genuine is you do actually risk a late change past you. Let's say that they put in the same number and there's like the same deadlift and they have the higher lot number or something like that. The lower lot number, and you think they're going to go out first. They load the plates and then they actually switch and you have to go out. You don't want that to happen and to just be fumbled into going first, and then they have the choice. So I think if you are in first, it's actually just intelligent to put something way out of reach and just wait. You know, I think that's like a really underrated strategy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be really cool to see how all that plays out. It'll be really cool to see sort of what happens with those secondary guys in that third place battle, because the other interesting thing about this is usually what we see is when there's 2 lifters who are miles out in front, they're also the 2 last deadlifters. So it kind of all happens at the end. Whereas in this instance, we might see Kevin, Emilio, and Potsy and Bren all pulling after Kana, maybe.
Yep.
And it's going to be like, oh, this guy's coming out to pull for third. And then, oh, next, this guy's coming out to win. And then, oh, this guy's coming out for third. And then, like, you know, it's going to be really interesting. Like, we don't usually see that much tussling going on. Like, I think the last 6 deadlift attempts could shift the podium around 6 times.
Yep.
Which is sick.
Yeah. That's going to be a really good finish. And it's going to mean all the coaches are going to have their maths hats on.
I'm helping out Zingini in this one, so we'll be battling for maybe like 9th. Yeah. I'll be against you for 9th. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back with the last 8 weight classes. All right, we are back for
We're
the
so back.
second half of the Nationals preview. We're going to start with the 69 kilo women. We have got 12 women. Matt, can you name them? Because I'm just going to move my chair. Quick, Matt, name 12 women.
80-12. Which class are we doing?
69s.
69.
So we have, I'll do it. We've got
No, chill.
Sorry, bro.
We got Brittany, Alexandra, Rachel, Aislinn, Steph, Leanne, Juliana, Shanae, Mara, Aisha, Naomi, and Alessia. Cool.
So we have 6 who we've highlighted as podium contenders. And really what I think we've got here is 5 of them sort of vying for second and third.
Big time.
And then Brittany miles out ahead.
So the spread between Alexandra nominated second is 457.5, down to Leanne nominated at 6th for 37.5. Just 20 kilos separating. And I think the thing to note there is that Leanne's was on a not the best executed day, a lot of missed attempts with a 4 for 9. So there's a lot of potential there to come up. And even with Steph as well with a 7 for 9, we have definitely those 5th and 6th nominated ladies, a lot of potential to be in the 450s very quickly. And then any progress from there, is obviously going to beg the question, what's second and third going to look like? Is it going to look like 450? Is it going to look like 470?
Yeah, I think let's start with Leanne. So her most recent competition, 437.5 with 4 for 9. Just actually come up from the 63 class as well. She did 430 and 442.5 in her previous 2 comps at 63. So
progress to total with a 4 for 9. Yeah.
Yeah. So that 442.5 she did 3 comps ago at 63 is her best total. And I think what we see this time is, that competition she deadlifted 200. The next 2 she did 180 and 187, and I'm fairly sure in both instances she only made 1 deadlift. So I think what we'll see from Leanne is a return to what I hope we see is a return to 8 or 9 made lifts, and somewhere in the 460s I think is actually really realistic for Leanne if she can pick up those makes along the way.
Definitely.
And Steph, next to talk on Steph, we look at the progress she's made from the last 3 meets. 395, 400, 437.
Big boom.
And that 437 was actually her worst made lifts out of those 3 comps as well. So if she can continue that progress and she can put together 8 or 9 made lifts, like we keep saying, that's going to put her in a great stead to do around that 460 mark as well. I think the really interesting one here, and the one I think that we could probably expect to shoot up the most, is Aislinn.
Yeah.
So Aislinn put up a huge training performance. I can't remember if it was 472 or 477, but it was one of those.
Yep.
And that was about a month ago. And if we look at the progress she's made, 385, 405, 450.
Yeah.
And then I think we'll probably see 480 or 485, which, obviously testament to her hard work. She was a junior last year.
Wow.
Refereed her at Junior Nationals. And
big up and coming.
We can really see sort of like what's happening here in front of us in terms of that progress. And I think we'll continue to see that. Another lifter out of MD Strength as well. So we spoke about Cindy earlier, got Aislinn out of MD Strength as well. So we're seeing some really good progress from those ladies. And I had a few people in my questions box blowing up MD Strength saying, watch out for them. They're coming, like all this stuff. So we've definitely got to look out for Aislinn as well. Next on that list is Rachel, who has made steady progress the last 3 comps, 432.5, 442.5, 452.5. So maybe we see 462.5.
Yep.
And then Alexandra, who was in the 63s and has kind of gone back and forth between 69 and 63 the last few meets. I know she did her last meet as a 63 at Oceana's. Previously did her only meet that's listed here was her best total, which is that 457, which was at 69, and she did go 9 for 9 that day. So I think I've seen a lot of her training. Her squat is the thing that kind of is the most impressive there. She squatted 180 in training, I know that for sure.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm hoping that we see again 8 or 9 made lifts, and I'm really interested to see sort of who finishes second
sort of
and
shakes
third
down, yeah.
in this class, because we could see like literally any number of these nominations could be
Yep.
shifted and shuffled. But what I am pretty sure of is that Brittany will win. We spoke a lot about Brittany on the SPD Cup recap show about her performance here. 185.5 squat, 110.5 bench, 205 deadlift, 501 total, 9 for 9 day. Won the SPD Cup. I believe had the second highest good lift points of the day of the women after Vicky, who obviously Vicky weighed in super, super light. And just coming into her own as a 69. We mentioned this earlier with Chris, with Liz, about, that last comp being the one that was the first one in that weight class again, and this next one having that entire time to prep for it in that bodyweight range. I think we see some really big improvements from Britt. She benched 120 yesterday.
Yeah, I would expect her to hit somewhere in the realms of 510 to 515. That'd be my expectation for her.
Me too, yeah.
Especially considering there's not pressure on her to sort of redline, and she has been making really good, steady progress. I think I saw her post something about having a break after Nationals and not competing again till October or something like that. So she mustn't be intending on going...
She's planning on doing SPD Cup again, not doing Worlds.
Not doing Worlds. Cool. So, I think she's got her sort of trajectory planned out for herself. And it would make sense for her to sort of just chip away. She might bench 115, 117. What you bench in training isn't always what you bench in competition, but she has hit that 120. And then, she might fall around the same sort of spot for squat, maybe chip it a little bit. And then I know she's made some really good deadlift progress in this prep. She's hit some PRs for like doubles and stuff like that. So that would suggest that she's got a bit there. And the pool, the 205 pool was great at SPD Cup. It looked like it was up there, but it looked like there was maybe a little bit of room. So
yeah, I think someone asked the question like, "Oh, do you think we'll see what people do at Worlds, at Nationals, where people like don't extend their record to save it for SPD Cup?" I think this could be one instance where Brittany just does enough to win, maybe, and saves the kilos on the total for SPD Cup so that she can potentially win SPD Cup. Like, I think I don't like it as a strategy, but it's not stupid. Like, it makes a lot of sense. Like, it's actually quite smart. It's not a good spectacle, but it's smart.
Yeah.
And I think like if anyone's got the ability to do it, it's Britt, because she's also not going to Worlds, so she's not going to extend her own record at Worlds. So she could just do enough to win and get through with a gold medal.
You know what else she could do? She could ball out, push the 69s up, go to 76 for SPD Cup, where the total is 495, and win.
Yeah, I was saying to her last week that it probably does make sense for her to do SPD Cup at 76.
Yeah.
And we'll get to 76s next, but I do think
it might not be 495.
I do think that record in the 76 will get obliterated this time around. So, maybe those two records are quite similar. Anything more to cover there on the 69s?
No, I think 69s, that's a wrap. We know that the only thing that I will say before we wrap is just the other ladies, just shy of the top six there that we have. Juliana, Shanae, Mara, Aisha, Naomi, and Alessia. We have this sort of like 415 to 405 nominated for Juliana, Shanae, and Mara. And then we have equal nominated totals for the latter three at 397.5. So again, like we've been saying with some of the other classes, very, very interesting battles happening off the top segment, which is exactly what you want to see at Nationals. And it'll make for a really, really good watch.
And also worth noting that the QT for this class was 397.5. So perhaps those three women who did 397.5 exactly were sandbagging the shit out of their nominations.
Yep.
And perhaps we see them ending up in that podium hunt.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Worth noting.
Worth noting.
So we don't get told that we forgot people.
We will.
That's okay.
All
right, 93 men.
93 men. So another big weight class in terms of numbers, 17 lifters.
Yep.
So I'll go through the lifter names. We've got Josh, Adam, Cullen, Simon, Dean, Daniel, Jonathan, Joseph, Lennox, Jade, Edward, Richard, Aiden, Michael, Daniel, Aaron, and Michael. A couple double up names in there. So
couple Daniels, couple Michaels.
Couple Michaels, Daniels. And we've got 8 lifters who sort of fall between that Josh Takua's nominated 806 to Joseph who's 727.5. And definitely a lot of progress that's been made, and I think some pretty significant differences that we will see on the platform compared with these nominated totals, and a lot of potential for shuffling in places from my perspective.
Yep.
What's cool to see, what I'll say straight out the gate, is that a lot of people, when we heard Josh was coming over to APA, were sort of saying, well, 93s is a clean now for a while. And I'm really happy and excited to see that a lot of the 93s have risen in their performances for one reason or another, not necessarily because Josh is there, and that there has probably been just a slight underwhelm to Josh's platform performance coming from a different federation that I'm sure he'll improve on. But you've kind of got this middle happening where actually it's looking to be a really exciting competitive podium battle rather than this like front runner who can't be touched and then the others. So I'm personally really excited about that. And I think what it does is it makes everyone get better. Like Josh has clearly addressed his standards of training this prep compared to SPD Cup, which is exactly what a really good professional athlete would do. And we've also seen the likes of Adam Jones rise immensely in training. I think it was 8:10 that he hit in training. Do you think it was on the same day? No, it would have been on different days.
He said SPD day in the
was it
post.
Really?
Yeah.
Woo! Okay, I thought it might have been on different days. So if he had that on the same day, he hit 8:10 with an awful lot of room, and like more room than I've seen from him in training bouts. So that's kind of cool to see him redlining in training less hard and kind of leaving more for the platform. I think that's going to be really exciting. But I think as well, it's probably the highest quality of lifting I've seen from Jonesy in terms of depth.
And from Josh.
In terms of pauses, in terms of deadlifts, in terms of like holding his deadlifts and having a good lockout. And of course, as well for Josh, I'll kind of slide along to who else I think is probably in that race, which is Simon. He's actually nominated fourth, but I think that he is very fresh to the class. He has had a lot of time to kind of like grow. He's a young lifter. He's a huge deadlifter. And I think that his nominated total is probably just a little bit deceiving. It's a kind of situation where at most competitions I've seen him at, he'll load for the win, whether he gets it or not, or he'll load for an achievement. And that's it comes with, risk, that you're going to kind of fall down a long way, especially if you take big deadlift jumps. And for someone who deadlifts 350 to 360, you're going to be losing 20, 30, even 40 kilos of a total from a single attempt. So I do think he's in the race there. I've seen him hit 290, 180, and like 340 this prep. So he's certainly going to be there over 800 on a good day. I do think that Callan will probably lead the chart. Oh, Callan and Jonathan Caruso. Actually, Jonathan Caruso is one that has made kind of crazy leaps from his nominated total. Like his nominated total is 730. He did like 803 in training the other day. So he's another one who's going to be up there. In my book, probably not fighting for the win, but definitely one that the other contenders are going to have to watch out for. And he will, I think, end up on the podium, most likely. He's had some execution issues in the past, but he's under Paddy Morrison now. And they've made some really, really good changes and improvements to his technique. He just looks way more robust now. I think 93s is probably just a class for him. And then we have Callan, who's going to be up there very, very... I think he's going to get very close to 800. 782, I think, was at Night of Champions, and he looked really good doing that. The only thing I'll say is he's been pretty open with his training. His grip hasn't looked great this prep. He's been losing a lot of the deadlifts out of his left hand, his underhand with like 310, 315, which is not characteristic for him. So maybe he's just really fatigued and he'll be fine on the day, but that's probably something he needs to look out for. And especially considering his placing is probably fairly cemented, I don't think he'll be reaching super hard. I think he'll probably just seek a nice progression. That's how I sort of see that playing out. And then Dean Sabawo, I looked after him last year. He's incredibly strong. He didn't have a coach coming into that competition, and he likely is still self-coached. And he's sort of this mix of wanting to train like a bodybuilder but just compete as well. And there were a lot of competition execution things wrong with that day, and I attempted to help him make some improvements kind of on the fly, because I literally saw him warming up and I was like, hey, do you need a hand kind of thing at Nationals? And he still did really well, and he's really, really strong. But for me, it's just a question of whether he's actually addressed some of those elements. And he's someone who could do very varied performances. He could do around what he's nominated, or he could do like 50, 60 kilos more than that, So yep. I think there's lots going on in here. And that's my kind of spiel on some of the top performers. How are you thinking about this class?
Yeah, so those are the same lifters that I wanted to highlight. Caruso nominated at 730 and Dean nominated at 737. They're the ones who I think can take like the biggest jumps from those nominations. Some of the things that you mentioned, obviously, Caruso coming up to the 93. He did 706 last year at Nationals at 83 on a 4 for 9 day. He is still the bench press record holder in the 83, and I think he's probably pretty likely to be the bench press record holder in the 93 after this Nationals. And we've seen the squat take off. The only issue I have with Caruso is the execution, but also the deadlift. I just don't think the deadlift strength is quite up to these guys like Takua, Jones, and Chahade, even Gibbons as well, even Dean as well. Like all 5 of those guys are going to be deadlifting 20 or 30 kilos more than what Caruso can do. So I think you're right in saying that he probably leads the way on subtotal, or he's probably very close to leading the way on subtotal, but just falls off near the end on deadlift. Dean I have less faith in than Jonathan. I think just with those execution errors and just the kind of decisions that he makes on comp day, like he doesn't seem to make lifts and he seems to just kind of just take round numbers. Like it's always like plus 10 or plus 20. Like it just seems to be quite random. Like it's not like he's not like locked into what he's got left. And he's just not, it doesn't seem to be a very analytically driven lifter.
There isn't much experience there. Like there isn't much competition experience. So when he rocked up to Nationals, it might have been his second comp or something like that. And he was really just doing it for funsies. Like it was like that, although he's so strong.
Yeah.
And so the decision-making process was a little bit of like, well, should we do this? And it was like, or it was like, no, I want this because it's like a milestone number, or I want this because whatever. And the jumps were often quite small, like really heavy openers. Like I wish I'd gotten to him a little earlier because I was too late to pull his squat opener down, which would have put him in really good stead that day. I think he narrowly lost to Jesse in that scenario, and we actually pulled a deadlift that got red lighted in the end.
That's right. Yep.
But he would have actually been like quite a bit ahead in that scenario if he had just put like 7 kilos on his squat, which would have been super feasible had he not opened so heavy, because he got like depth calls and all kinds of business. So he's someone who has like great potential, but it's not whether he takes it seriously, because I'm sure he takes his training very seriously. He's a really strong guy, but does he have the resources in his corner from a coaching and planning perspective to come in and hit a really good day?
Yeah,
and that's the question mark, and I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah,
there.
it seems to me like a little bit of a lack of awareness and lack of preparation for like what's actually coming. But also with Dean, like his squat and his deadlift are up to scratch, like up to the field, but the bench is just miles behind. And I think like, you know, he's missing 40 kilos that he needs on, or 30 kilos that he needs on bench press, which is stopping him being like a proper contender for the class. But we could see a huge squat, we could see a huge deadlift from Dean. And I totally agree on Simon. Like I think that 758.5 is not a reflection of his strength. I do agree 800 is probably more the ballpark. And I had a chat to him at the All-In meet a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, what's the plan? I think I gave him a scenario. If you need X for the win or you need a little bit less for second, what would you take? And he said, no one cares about second. So we might see like 375 loaded for the win or something just monstrous like that, which I'm here for.
Well, I think that we will see something monstrous like that. And the reason that I was really happy about what I mentioned before with, say, Josh and Adam is that Adam doing as well as he's doing, I think, has surprised a lot of people. It's probably surprised Josh a little bit. I could be wrong, but I mean, I don't think people were, I certainly, speaking for myself, I wasn't expecting Adam to be quite as close to Josh as he looks to be. So what I think that's going to do is going to push both of them to have someone's going to have an extraordinary day. One of them is going to have an extraordinary day. And then Simon's going to try and beat that person. Mm-hmm. So he's going to have to pull something massive.
Yeah.
It's going to be sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like with Jones, like his last 3 meets, 785, 786, 792.5. It's almost like it's been kind of brewing.
Cooking.
And it's just starting to take off. Like
he's
now,
a chef.
Now the pot's boiling. And like I reckon I honestly think that we'll see like 820 from both Josh
I see that.
and Adam.
Yeah, I see that.
And I do think that makes it a little bit out of reach for Simon, but he will fucking go for it, which I love. And then I also think that I also think that Callan or Jonathan could end up on the podium because Simon might reach for first or second
Icarus.
and fall off. So that's kind of what I'm expecting, is that there's this top two battle between Josh and Adam, with Simon like kind of wanting to be a part of it, but it being a little bit too far.
Yep.
And maybe it's not. Maybe it's similar to what happened with Sam Forsberg last year in the 105, in that those two at the top kind of like pull each other down a little bit in a way, and like they go a little bit conservative in a way. And then they do leave the door open for Simon, but I don't think that Simon can fly under the radar because everyone knows how big his deadlift is.
Yeah, I think though that it could be underrated. So like in the sense of, it's easy to look at someone who's got a massive deadlift and has at times not executed it and just brush it off and say he won't execute. But the reality of him is, when his deadlift is on, it is fucking unbelievable. And it's like he could just pull the world. So I think that Josh and Adam would do very well to not pull themselves down and be conservative. That would be the wrong choice in my book. It would be high risk.
I agree.
But I do agree with you in the sense that I think Simon ends up in first or off the podium, most likely.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel. So yeah, I think there's sort of like that three guys who could win.
Yeah, I think he's totally okay with that.
Yeah, I think there's three guys who could win, and then I think there's another two or three who could get on the podium if one of those three guys takes a risk that they can't manage. And we've got to make sure that these boys all make weight and that they don't bomb.
Yeah,
because
make weight.
Jonesy missed weight last year.
Hate to see it.
Josh has had days where he's 4 or 5 for 9. Jonesy's had days where he's missed a lot of lifts. Less recently, he's been a lot better executing recently.
Yep.
Obviously, Simon's had days where he hasn't executed amazingly.
I do think that 820 is like probably a pretty accurate ballpark for where I expect things to get.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting. This is one of those classes where I still haven't picked a winner in what I will do in fantasy yet. So still have to decide. I've got like 20 hours left to put my picks in.
But whenever it comes to like tussles like that, I usually just pick like the homie. So it's like whoever I chat with more or whatever. I'm just like,
I like this guy. I want to see him win.
back the homie.
Yeah.
Or the homettes.
All right. So good luck to all the 93 kilo men. May the best man win. Moving on to the 76 kilo women. We have 8 women. We've got Shania, Young, Evangeline, Hannah, Kaylin, Trinity, Holly, and Dorota. Maddie, what are we thinking here? Great
class. I do think that we have certainly got a few front runners. I'm very interested to see Young relative to this nominated total. I know she's making great progress, but Shania's also had some tremendous training lifters prep. She looks like she's getting quite close to a 200 squat, and she is pulling over 200 just very casually now. I can't recall like what she's done in training for bench press, but I think it's gone fine. Like I don't think she's had any problems. And then I think that also when we look at that 480 off a 7 for 9 day, and really the next few girls having 9 or 8, I think is also indicative that there's probably a little bit of room there, and she's already far enough ahead. So my expectation is she'll be hard to catch. I think that if she has a good day, because she's had a great prep, and her two big lifts of the 3 have been progressing really, really nicely. She's also clinical, so when it comes to standards, I rarely see glaring issues in training or in competition. But I am intrigued to see where Young goes. I haven't seen a lot of Evangeline or Hannah's training. I'm not sure if you have, but if we look at those and some of the sort of prior competitions, you can see that, Evangeline hit 467.5, hit 452.5 after that, both 9 for 9. That sort of perks my interest a little bit. And then when you look at Hannah Altman, she hit 442.5, but looked like she could have hit much more than that based on her training. So I think she's possibly someone who could see a big boost from that nominated total. I think that comes down, I know from speaking with her, that comes down to even just like mental preparation and where she's at psychologically coming into the competition, where confidence is at, but also where she's at from like a weight management standpoint. I know that I'm pretty sure that the weight management in South Africa was...
Well, she's upper class, so she's actually going up from 69 to 76.
Beautiful.
And I think that's a huge advantage for Hannah.
That's a massive one, yeah.
What's kind of let Hannah down in the past has been, some of it has been execution stuff.
Yep.
Like not hitting squat
Standards,
depth.
yeah.
I think bench depth is something that she struggled with initially. I think she had to make a few changes to her bench. Obviously, she's a huge bench presser. It's a huge strength of hers. She has the biggest bench out of this group by a fair chunk.
Not having to manage weight there is going to be big.
And she did 442. I'm fairly sure she's done 117 in training. So that's 15 kilos more than what she has nominated.
Yeah, wow.
I know she's squatted 180, which is 15 kilos more than she has nominated. Deadlift, I haven't seen a lot of from her.
So there's a huge potential there.
Yeah, she's also gone back to Steve as her coach.
Right.
She's with Thomas Lilly for a bit. She's gone back to Steve, and yeah, I'm really hoping to see Hannah back up to her best because she has done 470 a couple times, and both of those times as a 69, which means her potential at 76 is far greater than that 470.
Do you think she has the potential to challenge Shania?
I don't think at this stage. Like I'd be
Like
surprised.
this year, yeah,
I'd be surprised if Shania didn't win this year, but I can't see why next year that she can't continue progressing, especially like as she settles into the weight class.
Yep.
Um,
Obviously, Shania will keep progressing too. But
yeah,
no, I definitely think she's one to look out for, and that there's a lot of potential sitting there. And if the stars just align a little bit better, things like being in a weight class where she maybe just belongs a bit better in terms of just management of weight is going to be a big one, because that, depending on the person, like some people manage weight cuts and the pressure of that differently. And for some people, it's just part of the routine. Like they're kind of used to it. It doesn't really stress them out too much. And for other people, it's like physically, mentally very draining. And that can mean the difference between like sinking their squats and hitting borderline and getting a red on their, or 2 reds on their opener, and then going 2 for 3 and losing 15 kilos on their squat, right? And that just completely unfoiling the whole day. So I think for her, it's going to be big to come in with less stress and less pressure. And hopefully prep's gone well, sitting back into maybe more familiar strategies with old coach and things like that. So yeah, I'd really like to see her be able to get into the upper 400s and poke at that second place position and do a really strong outing and set herself up.
Yeah, and to go back to Shania really quickly, like she squatted 190 this week.
Really nice.
I spoke with her, like obviously she does my nutrition, so I talk to her quite often. She's aiming for 95 to 97 on bench, and she's going to be looking at like 215-ish, 220 on deadlift, which if you add all of those up, it's quite close to the world's QT.
Yeah.
And it was looking for a while like no one was going to hit the 76 world's QT, and I think having that bar so high has pushed her harder and has like forced her to progress to get to that level, because she wants to go to worlds, and I think she'll be in that 500 to 510 range, and I think we might see a crack at trying to hit that QT on the third deadlift. That's kind of where my read on this is.
It'd be cool if she could be far enough ahead on the second with a fairly chill second to then just be able to throw on whatever it takes and see if it can be done. Because like I remember, like Shania has that dog.
She got some dog.
I remember was at Newcastle Barbell where she hit 200 for the first time. That was one of the coolest lifts.
It was like 12 seconds.
It was one of the coolest lifts I've ever watched.
Sick.
I think that was amazing. And I think that if you sort of package up that and the motivation behind hitting a world's QT, especially considering that I think it would be like a surprise or a shock to most, considering the gap between where she perceivably was and where she could end up, I'd love to see her have a crack at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love that.
And then we've got, obviously, after Shania, both of us think that Shania will be a little bit ahead of the next group. There's the three girls we've spoken on. Hannah, I don't know a lot about Evangeline, but that 467.5 really stands out to me as like, that was obviously not her last comp, but it was the one before that. And it stands out to me as like if she can get back to this level, like she's a pretty good shot at that silver. And we'll see what happens with Jung. Like I know she's progressed a lot. I think she's just come out of juniors. Is that right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think she's just come out of juniors, and maybe this might be her second year of opens. And obviously she's settling in, making a lot of progress. I did talk to her at the All-In Barbell Comp, and she's doing a lot of work at the moment. She works quite a stressful, like mentally stressful job, long hours, and then on coaching on top of it. So we'll see if she can continue progressing like with all that workload. It's obviously a lot of stress to do all that stuff and then still try to manage your recovery. But she seems to be progressing really well and training really well. It seems like her prep's going really good. So I think that battle for second and third will be really, really fun.
Definitely. I think it's going to be a very exciting class. And, I think that watching all these weight classes and like we sort of alluded to at the start, having different elements that are causing the weight classes to all push up because there's more competition. There's people who are behind them who are maybe coming up into that top 5, and they need to make sure that they rise up, or the QTs being set higher and higher. I think that all these elements we can see in practice, that it is causing the tide to continue to rise, which is something that I love to see. Like, I think having been around for a little while, and you hear various comments about like Australia relative to the world standard or Australia at worlds and whatnot, I think we definitely have a few guys coming through and doing big things, but I think particularly speaking to the standard of the women and the sort of performers that we're seeing emerge on the women's side, I'm particularly excited about that and what we're going to then see as a knock-on over the next 1, 2, 3 years at the world level. I think this is something to speak on and definitely look forward to. And yeah, I'm just excited to see people like the 76ers rising to the challenge of hitting this QT, and, you know, that creates exactly what we want to see at a national event. So it's going to be really cool.
Yeah. Good luck to all the 76 kilo women. We'll move on. We've got 4 weight classes left. Fuck, this is going to be 3 hours or what? What are we up to, Luke? 220. We've got. All right, 105s. 12 lifters in the 105s. Hung, Michael, Sam, Tom, Thomas, Tony, Brody, Anthony, some guy called Matt, Tulani, Josh, and Steven. So we've highlighted 5 guys as potential sort of podium getters. So we've got Hung nominated 846. We've got Michael nominated 835.5. Sam and Tom both nominated 822.5. And then actually nominated 8th with 762.5, Anthony Hill, but he has done 820 at his comp prior to the nominated total. So we're going to sort of put him in 5th there at 820. I know this class is near and dear to your heart, Matt. So I'd like to have your perspective on this. How do you think this is going to shake out?
Okay, so from my perspective, it's a very different situation to last year. It was probably I would say it was the most exciting watch of last year's Nationals.
I think it's also worth noting the 4th and 5th lifters were 10 kilos off the podium last year. That was Murdad and Yanni. Mm-hmm. They're both not here, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So we would have had even more depth had those guys.
That's true. And then we have newcomers, one more up the top there, like Anthony Hung, who's obviously, front runner after winning SPD Australia Cup. I think that the first thing I'll speak to is the Hung versus Michael situation, which I believe is going to be the battle for first place. And I think that when we spoke about the 105s last year, that exactly what we said in a lot of ways came true, that we got correct who the strongest on paper lifters were. And what happened was that the performances fell down, sort of what we alluded to could happen in the 93s this year if they're not careful. And then Sam, who was pretty unknown to everyone and had totaled like 60 kilos less as his nominated total, came through and ended up winning, which was one of the most remarkable moments I think I've ever witnessed in powerlifting. I don't see something like that happening this year because everyone knows who he is. He's the reigning champion. He's not unknown. And then I fall back to and I default back to, well, who's the strongest on paper?
Just to talk on that point as well, I think what we had last year was such a big gap between the final deadlifts. Like it was Rand did 327.5 and then Sam did 345. And that 345 number was like pretty crazy in the moment. It was like, holy shit, 345. Just that SPD Cup, Rand did 350.5 and Hung did 351. So like they're already up at that level of Sam, that in order for Sam to like sneak in and kind of like do enough to win, provided those guys have good days, of course, it's going to have to be 360.
Or more. That's the thing. Like if you look at what was required, so if you see like a similar relative performance on subtotal, if you look at what was required at that 345, 17.5 more than what Michael pulled, and Michael pulls 350, we're talking 367.5. If there's just a similar performance. So it's a bigger ask for sure.
Obviously, Sam is newer in the sport than Hung and Michael. So we may see more progress on squat and bench to the point where, that gap between what was needed last year between Michael 327.
It becomes
and Sam.
10 or it becomes
It's
7.
not 17.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 7. Maybe it's 5. So that's obviously also a possibility too.
The other thing I think that's important to note is that Michael and Hung are in this situation where they're likely going to push each other to greater heights. I don't think we're going to see that same situation of the lifters substantially falling down at that top end to sort of really open the door for lifters to kind of pull in. And the other thing too is that it's highly likely that, or it's a moderate likelihood that Sam's not going to pull last. You know, so you do have on paper now the 350.5 and the 351 that are the biggest deadlifts in the class at this point. So you would expect those gentlemen to be pulling last unless you have, you know, a bit of a Hail Mary moment, which may well be the case. I think the tactics are going to look really different there. And again, everyone's eyes are going to be open to it. It's going to be a far more normal sort of situation of competitiveness, not so much a, 345 is a bit of a Hail Mary, and it wasn't. It was exactly what he needed, exactly what he had. But I think that's going to be a less likely scenario. But in saying that, I'm not one to count Sam out. I think that, you know, I don't watch a lot of his training. I'm not really up to date on where he's at. He is a bit newer to the sport. I don't give him huge odds of challenging, let's say, the likes of Hung, who's the current front runner and who beat Michael at SPD Cup. But anything can happen at the end of the day. You know, it is nationals. I do think that they're close enough that any number of things could happen to jig things up. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I think if Hung and Michael come out and blast days and have fantastic days, it's them versus each other. I think if that happens, that's it. End of story. I think that if some things happen to shake things up, someone misses on depth, it impacts their squat. Someone misses on grip, it impacts their deadlift or something to that effect. It obviously opens the door. But once again, it's kind of speaking to that idea that I think the door has to be opened for there to be an opportunity.
I think it's also worth mentioning Hung's competition here was clinical and also he had room.
Pretty chill.
So 846 with a bit of room. Michael 835.5 with a 17.5 kilo jump missed on squat. So
and room on the deadlift.
Let's just say he takes 12 there.
Yeah.
Like that's, you know, he's in that high 840s.
Yeah. It becomes an
Plus we bake in a little bit of improvement. Maybe we're looking at 850.
Yeah.
If those two perform at the level that we think they can, which is at roughly that 850, 855, I don't see Sam or Tom getting to that level.
Yeah.
But if those two slip up, if there's another missed big jump from Rand, if there's a, you know, maybe Hung gets called for some soft knees on his second deadlift, maybe we see things start to look a little different.
Yeah. I imagine like Hung's ceiling is probably around that 860 mark. I think he can probably hit a little bit more on his squat and probably up to about 10 more on his deadlift. I think that could happen. Michael, I think, is probably quite similar. I think that he may have the edge if all three show up because let's just, again, give him benefit of a doubt, maybe 305 or 307 when he attempted. I think 310 was his attempt.
That's right.
His bench was a pretty drastic underperformance relative to his best. Let's say he has an equal best benching day. I think it's about 200 or 202.
His best is 200, and he's sort of been in the low 190s the last few comps. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can get back to 200.
Yeah, so if you were, let's just say, to give him a 15 kilo subtotal improvement based on making and also based on just having a bit of a better benching prep, all of a sudden, you know, it puts him in a really, really, that puts him, you know, ahead of where Hung was at SPD Cup with the same pull, and he had a bit of room there. So I do think that these two sort of titans, if you will, are going to battle it out, and that if someone, you know, misses a particularly big jump, that could open the window, open the door for that second place. But I think it's unlikely. It's unlikely. I'll say it. It's unlikely that one of these two does not win.
It's unlikely, but not impossible.
Of course.
I think, yeah, and we got to talk on Chapo, of course. 822.5 at Nationals, 807 the meet before that, 815 at his most recent meet, which was SPD Cup. He's someone who is just like really, really well built across all three lifts. He executes at a really, really high level. The only two misses he had at SPD Cup were on technicality. I think it was bar dip on
bar
bench
dip
press.
On the bench press, soft on the deadlift,
soft lockout on the deadlift. So, you know, if he cleans those up, we could see 840 from Chapo comfortably. And if those other two have disappointing days, like we could see Chapo win. We could definitely see Sam win. It's going to be a really interesting class. But I do think the one person who's being overlooked the most is Anthony Hill. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, nominated with 762.5, but he's done 820. He's a junior. He is a really good lifter in terms of his technique and his competency and how he looks under the bar. He did his qualifier here, and like he had easily 20 kilos on all three lifts and just looked outstanding and was just moving weights so smooth and so well, and his technique is like very to the standard. He's someone who I can see sort of jumping from that best of 820 into 850 because of just the age and the amount of progress. Like the meet before the 820 was 777. So like if we sort of bake in that progression for someone so young, someone so new, we could see him on the podium or maybe even fucking winning.
I'm really interested to see Anthony because I think he is a little bit of an unknown in a few ways. Like he posts a lot of his training. So I checked out some of his training the other day before we did the pod. Before we're doing the pod, we're doing it right now. Oh my goodness,
doing it now, man.
And it looks good. I think he's commenting that his deadlift maybe doesn't feel the best right now. His bench looks amazing. He's definitely making great progress on his bench, and his squats, if you just compare it to the prep where he did 820, have not looked the same. Doesn't mean they're not looking good. His depth looks a little bit more iffy. Might be the angles of the videos. He's a big guy, tall guy. And I know he's recently gone from self-coach to being coached, I think, by Rondell, someone said.
Okay.
So there's some changes going on there, which might mean some programming changes and things like that. So I think there's potential for him to come in and do like an 840 day or something and go really well because he's young and he's making strides. There's also potential that he comes in and does like 800, 810 or something like that and just has like a pretty good day because maybe some things aren't going perfectly. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
But as well, I think that something I noted from his 820 prep when I kind of just looked through a little bit of the training was kind of didn't look like he was going to do 820 in his training. And then he really had a fantastic day. He looked incredible.
And that 820 was kind of maxed out as well.
It was pretty capped
which tells you that he's willing to take risks.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
No, it's definitely cool. So I definitely think he's a shooter in there. To speak on Chaplin, I have a lot of love for Tom.
Love Chapo.
He's great. I think that he's like a really hard worker and he's incredibly consistent and he's a fierce competitor. I think that I just would like to see him hit the lifts that he missed at SPD Cup, and I think that's probably where the mindset's going to be. I think that it has seemed to me like the wheels have gotten a little sticky over the last maybe 12 months in terms of like him progressing and moving forward and training kind of like jumping up, which I think is a very natural part of that process. Like he's not been in the 105s that long, like he was in 93, like, a handful of years ago. So I think there's still a lot of progress to be made there and a lot of like movement for him in the class, but you're always going to have those moments where you need to sort of solidify. And I feel like if I see him come in and do, like an equal PR squat, like a 305, hit that 205, I think it was 205 that he missed at SPD Australia Cup. And then it was 327, I think, for the deadlift.
That's right.
That would be a huge total. And that's where he is. So I just want to see that. And I think that's where I expect his mindset to be.
Me too.
He's very like, he's got that like good like mental gift, if you will, of like just being able to look ahead and like know that he's on the path. And so I would like to see him just come in and do that. And I think that, like you said, that should be a strong contender with Sam and Anthony, or depending if the guys have this really high performance at the top two, or they maybe have a little bit of a lower performance, there could be more going on than we're anticipating in terms of tussling. So,
and also Chaplin's quite hard to predict because he hasn't posted this prep. And he's been posting every other prep. So it's been kind of like, oh, yeah, okay, I think Chapo can do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, he's posted like a couple 200 benches on stories here and there, but not much else.
Yeah, and I love following Chapo's training, so it's been a bit of a shame that he hasn't been posting.
And
I
love watching him train.
It makes it hard to predict, but like he could easily come in and do 845.
That's the thing. Like that's the thing about him is like, because he's like such a robust lifter, he's well built across the lifts, he's very balanced. If he has had a really tremendous prep, I definitely think he's someone who could come in and do something very surprising. Yeah.
And I spoke to Kelly on Tuesday and I asked her, how's Chapo going? Can you give me a prediction for the potty? and she said he's looking for a total PR and deadlift redemption. So he wants to get that deadlift that he missed, which is what you were alluding to. I'm sure he wants to nab that bench press record, which is still the standard at 205. I think he's probably the most likely out of all these guys to get it.
I think Anthony's quite likely to attempt that. Yeah, he's hit 200 like quite easily in training.
Okay.
I actually think that he may bench more than Tom.
Okay.
But that's yet to be seen. But he looks pretty remarkable on the bench press. He might fall off quickly or something, but the way the pace of the 195s and the 200s has looked, I think he's definitely a shoe-in for like a 207 attempt.
Because if he's at 205, that's 10 kilos above the 820 total just on bench.
Yep.
So, yeah, like I think he's looking like a nice dark horse, like a bit of a schmocker.
Yep, definitely agree with that.
All right, and the other boys, Tom Glover is one who's really interesting. He's from Melbourne, young kid, big deadlifter.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be one to watch in the coming years. Tony Nguyen, the nicest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
Absolutely love Tony.
When you look at
he'll be fun to watch.
When you look at Tom, Tony, and Brody, I know that Tony and Brody have voiced like aiming for 800, like publicly. Like Tony, I watched the ESS YouTube where a lot of the ESS crew have been like posting their prep. He's like, I want to squat 300, I want to total 800. And then I saw Brody on one of his Instagram posts a little while ago being like 125 kilos to go, and that made like 800.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of people aim for 800. I'd be surprised if Thomas wasn't aiming for 800 as well. I mean, it's like that classic milestone number.
And that Matt guy.
Nah, fuck that guy. And then like Talani pulled 310 the other day. Looks to be doing pretty well with his prep. Josh has had a rocky prep, and I've been chatting with him quite a lot. He's been quite injured, but he's come back to form really nicely.
Yeah,
so I'm really
now.
excited to see him pull together a strong day relative to like how his prep has been. I think that he's just like super proud that he's going to be there and probably doing around his best. And then Stephen was 730. I'm not sure where he's going to end up, but I'm keen to see what he can do. I think that there'll be a lot of, there'll be that top crew. Then there's going to be this sort of somewhat of a battle for the first place of the next crew. And yeah, we'll see kind of how that shapes up. No idea what Matt's going to hit.
So last year we had 5 guys above 800. It was 812, 812 and a half, and then 3 guys who did 822 and a half.
Yep.
How many do we think go over 800 this year? I think it will be 9.
How many?
I think 9.
9?
Or 7. I'm going to go with 7.
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be 5 or 6.
Okay. Are you going to be one of those?
Yes.
Ooh.
I think that it's one of those things. I mean, you know what? Actually, I actually don't think I'll be one of those. I think that that's in my cards, but I think that when it comes to competition day, especially like the stakes of this competition, like for me personally, there's not going to be like a lot of motivation to reach hard. I'm going to be trying to make lifts, and that probably means that I get just less than my like top end capability. So I reckon I'll probably end up in like the 790s, most likely. And I think that the other guys who are aiming for 8, I do think that's a big reach. Doesn't mean they can't do it. I just think that a lot of times people aim for milestones a little prematurely. And so I think the likelihood is the guys who are aiming for 8s, not many of them actually get there. Again, happy to be like pleasantly surprised by that because I'd love to see all the guys who have called that 8 hit it. But I think that Brody and Tony are in the 760s ballpark.
Yep.
So, I mean, over 800 would be a freaking huge leap of progress. And like, by all means, so, like get after it. But the likelihood for me is like, I'd probably see them going more in the 790s. Glover, I know nothing of his training. I know he's a massive deadlifter. I think his 770 at MD Strength was pretty tough. I think I was there for that. So again, I don't expect there to be many more than that top threshold. Maybe one of us in this 750, 760 bracket, maybe getting 8.
I'm going to back the boys in. I'm going to say all 4 of you.
Cool.
You're welcome, fellas. I know you're all listening. All right. Next up. So good luck to all the 105.
And that's what I mean.
fellas.
Like that's me saying they're all going to have great days. And I actually hope that if it comes to it and it's like, 800 Hail Mary or 795, I hope that people choose not to attempt the 800 because like that means that all those guys will do like 820 next year.
Yes.
Rather than like do 770 this time because they tried for 800 and then nothing happens.
Yeah, of course. Yep. So good luck to all the 105 boys. Got 4 weight classes left, Matty. We're going to make it.
Let's go.
All right. The 84 kilo women. Very fun class. We have 6 competitors. We've got Yanni, Bethany, Nicola, Ajwa, Rebecca, and Rhiannon. I'll let you start on this one, Matty.
Yeah. Okay. So awesome weight class. It's going to be great to see a rebattle. Shame we don't have Isabella in there for the rebattle, but I think we have another contender in Nicola pop up, which is great. I know that from chatting to Isabella, she's more interested in pursuing 76s in the future.
Yep.
She'd actually inquired with APA whether she could kind of drop down, but we don't allow that in that way. So yeah, she's made a choice, which I think makes sense for her to just like, she's been in sport for a long time. She's going to come back later and maybe see her in the 76s, which would be very exciting. Yanni has had an amazing prep. She looks very, very strong. And she won that weight class battle with 542.5. And she looks very well positioned to increase that by, I'd say, a margin of at least 10 kilos. Beth has also looked to have a very strong prep, particularly on the squat. And her delts look good as well. Bench look good as well. I know she has supposedly encountered like an injury, like a back injury or something like that. These things can go like one of a few ways. They can, either really hinder the performance of the day. They can be like a 48-hour acute response thing where they're really, really shitty and then you're okay. I mean, I can even speak to my own experience. I had a like lower back disc injury a few weeks ago, and it's really not made too much of an impact on the overall trajectory of things, even though it's had to be managed. So it could be that, or it could be some other version of events. So I don't really know where Beth's going to end up. I hope she comes in red hot and strong because I think it could be another really good rematch. And considering how good Yanni has looked, I think that, again, it would come down to like the final deadlift element, which is exactly what happened. If I'm not wrong, she attempted 227.5 and missed to try and win. So I'd love to see something like that. I think Nicola's a very exciting lifter for this sort of contest. And I think that if Beth happens to fall down a little bit, you're going to have, a very interesting scenario of who ends up where on the podium, right? I think Nicola squatted like 195 for 2 in training recently. And she's switched from conventional to sumo from what I've seen, which would suggest to me that she's going to be deadlifting more than 210. If you stick with the change, it means it must feel pretty nice. It's very rare for someone to switch and go, I'm going to pull 200 and just see where it goes. So maybe she squats 2, maybe she deadlifts 220 and benches 5 kilos more or 7 kilos more than what she has and puts herself into this, 15, 25, 30 kilo improvement. So 520 to 530 kind of range, which is extremely competitive. And that will be really fun to watch. I think that's going to be really cool, but it's a bit of an unknown apart from Yanni, really. Like Nicola has posted a bit of her training. Yanni has shown pretty much everything and looks great. Beth has looked good, a bit of an injury question. So yeah, I think it'll be very exciting, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah, like I'm obviously really excited for this one, given that Coach Yanni, this prep has been, actually was so bad at the start. Like she was very, very close to pulling out.
I noticed that, yeah.
And about 8 weeks ago, she's like, I think I need to pull. It was around Christmas time. She's like, I think I need to pull out. I'm like, let's just give it 3 more weeks of like doing your rehab and actually like taking this seriously, and let's see where we are in 3 weeks, and then we can make a decision. But like, I didn't want her to pull out before actually going all in first.
Yeah.
Because she was kind of just half-assing her training. She was kind of half-assing her diet. Her weight was up. She was half-assing her rehab. Her back was sore. And since that conversation, she's like completely shifted a gear. She finished the last block with a 190 squat triple, which was like realistically at 7. She deadlifted 200 for a double, which was probably at 8, and she benched 125. And this block, she squatted 205 with probably 10 kilos in the tank, maybe a little bit more than that on the day. She's benched 127 a couple times, and her final deadlift is today. I think she's going to do it around about 210. So for Yanni, like I think the key is going to be getting the kilos back on the squat that she missed on at SBD Cup. Her squat prep wasn't great for SBD Cup. We probably opened too heavy, and we ended up taking a 10 and then a 5.5 kilo jump. We'll definitely open up those jumps this time around, and we'll try to get somewhere in the 210 to 215 range for that third. And I think if that's the case for Yanni, I think she'll be pretty hard to beat. If she can squat about 210 or 215, I think she'll be quite hard to beat.
I agree.
Particularly with the bench and the deadlift improving again on last prep. It's just a matter of like taking the right attempts and actually maximizing the kilos on the day. But all that said, Beth's squat, her best is 197, which was a few comps ago now. She'd 187 at SPD Cup and was still close enough to actually have a go for the final deadlift, that's with a day where she didn't bench up to what she was expecting.
Yep.
Which means like we absolutely can't write off Beth.
I don't think so. I think that you could definitely see both Yanni and Beth end up in the 550s, and it be a matter of, you know, who does what, who actually secures what lift.
Yeah.
Just depends.
Totally.
Just depends like how healthy Beth comes in. I think.
How bad's this back injury?
Yeah. I think prior to that, I would have been suspecting 550s.
Yes.
From both of them.
Yes.
So I think that I can still expect that, and that it just depends how that's going. You know, that's kind of where I sit on it.
Yeah.
And she's got all the right people in her corner to kind of bring that around quickly. And like I say, with these things, especially when you're like really trained, when you're in that sort of element of like really high fitness and you're really strong, you can be a little bit susceptible to just copying something like this, but then also it can recover really, really quickly as well because of that state that you're in. So I think it just depends how that's going.
Yeah, for sure. I think like if Beth comes in feeling good and confident in her body, which I think is another thing that's really important. I think when you can suffer an injury, sometimes you're subconsciously not quite pushing as hard as you may be capable of because of that like fear. I really hope that's not the case. I hope to see her squat like in the middle 190s, bench above 130, and then deadlift above 220, above 225. Sort of. Yep. That's kind of where I expect her top end is. Which makes her really competitive if she comes in healthy and performs well.
Yeah. So again, I think like with Nicola, like again, I think people have been calling her a dark horse as well. I think we're aware that she's improved a lot. We're aware that, you know, there's going to be, you know, potentially a tussle in there for who's going to be in what podium placing. I think that it's with a healthy Yanni and Beth, it's a bit of a reach, even with a lot of progress. But I do think there's going to be a lot of that space is going to be cut down, which is very impressive in its own right. Then if we look to the next three girls, Adjoa, Rebecca, Rhiannon, we have nominated total 460, 450, 437. So pretty tightly bunched in there. I'll be coaching Adjoa for Steph, who coaches Adjoa. And I know she's had a really, really strong prep. So I think she'll make some sound progress there and push on up towards close to that 500 mark, or making some headway on that. And hopefully Rebecca and Rhiannon are kind of similar in terms of their trajectory. So there's a nice little tussle there.
Rebecca's been going really well. I follow her training. She's been PRing everything.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be great. Again, super fun class. Hopefully a great battle at the top.
Yeah.
And then another sort of secondary battle behind that, which is exactly what we like to see. So 84 is
just
looking fun.
Just to touch on Nicola a little bit before we move on to the next class.
Yep.
I think the thing here is like she's a dark horse. She's made a lot of progress, but it's also kind of a little bit unknown because she hasn't posted heaps.
Mm-hmm. The deadlift is unknown.
Yeah, I did a bit of a stalk a couple of weeks ago and I couldn't really get a good grasp on where she's at.
I mean, you can on the squat. Like 195 for 2 was completely maximal. I wouldn't expect much more than 5 or 7 on that. And the bench press, I mean, as a 100-kilo bench presser, I think I saw some like rep work around the 90s and maybe like maybe a double around the 100 or something like that. So I think there's going to be some modest improvement there. And then the deadlift is probably the one that's just a little bit hard to pick. I mean, sure, if she comes in and pulls like something crazy,
250.
She'll be in the run.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Like if her squat has gone up so much, so she's going to squat 15-kilo PR, and she's, let's say, just gotten like a little technical edge by doing sumo. So 210 has turned into 215 or 217. And then that squat progress has had an imprint on the sumo, then she could be in the 220s. She could be 230, you know? So I just don't know with the deadlift. I think that's the one that will decide whether she's potentially in the running if the top two just have okay days, versus whether she'll just be more so trying to secure that second or third place.
Yep. Yeah, super exciting. It'll also be a little wrinkle on the end of the comp with who ends up with the deadlift record, because all three of those women are kind of like in that similar sort of, because Yanni took the standard with 217.5. Obviously, Beth had the attempt that was much more than that. And Nicola could definitely be in that 220 to 230 range as well. So it'll be interesting to see who finishes with that record.
Absolutely.
Cool. So good luck to all the 84-kilo women. And moving on to the 120-kilo men. I've got 9 lifters: Sam, Josh, Tristan, Cody, Taj, Charles, Daniel, Samisi, and William. So I think Looking at the top 4 who we have highlighted with quite a big advantage on the next 5 is Cody, Tristan, Josh, and Sam. Cody is nominated 4th here, but I kind of put him above Tristan in terms of what I think he's capable of, just because of that last performance and how many kilos he left on the platform. I believe he missed a 22.5 kilo deadlift jump and a 20 kilo squat jump.
Yeah.
Which, gets him into the 870s.
So you might have left 25 or 30 on the table of that. Yeah.
So I think Cody is a lot closer to Josh and Sam than what the nominations would tell you and what his best total would tell you.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at this as like a top 3 with Tristan like 4th and then that next group after. That's kind of how I'm viewing this one.
No, I see it that way as well. And I think there's a high potential for this to be incredibly close three-way battle.
Yeah.
Incredibly close.
Totally.
I think that Sam has done a really good job of closing the gap on Josh, who seemingly was like outpacing Sam. But Sam's training has kind of taken this avenue where he started with a new coach. It's sort of like this more slow burn approach, which I really like, which is more sort of targeted towards it's more straight sets progressions and stuff like that, a little less top set focused. And, as you would term, kind of takes a while to almost like bake in and come out at the top end. But I think we saw that from him with his huge performance at SPD Australia Cup with 863 and 9 for 9. And I think that we can expect him to keep now chugging forward at a nice consistent rate. Josh, obviously super talented and relatively new to the weight class. I know he's had some knee issues this prep that have resolved, but that has impacted the prep. His bench press is phenomenal, and I think he'll progress that. His deadlift is often the question mark in regard to how he executes, how it feels relative to the others, and it's probably the linchpin here for him. I think that I would still consider Josh to be my slight favorite overall, but I do think that he's probably the one that's a little bit at risk with the deadlift, where if it doesn't show up really, really well, obviously you've got Sam with a massive pull, and you've got the potential for Cody to be pulling somewhere between 340 and 355 or something like that, and sort of positioning himself or trying to position himself ahead of Josh before Sam then comes out and decides for everyone what the story's going to be. So, yeah, I mean, I think the question mark here is, what do we think Sam could pull if he had to?
Well, I think the 363 that he did at SPD Cup was quite close to maximal. Maybe he had 5. That's my read on it. So if he's made a little bit of progress, maybe 370.
Maybe 370, yeah.
Maybe 370, or in that plus or minus 2.5 of 370 is probably where I would have it being for Sam. You have Josh as your slight favorite. I have Sam as my slight favorite just because of that edge on the deadlift. I also see Josh taking much bigger jumps than Sam, which can conserve energy. As we know, we're both big fans of big jumps. But I also think it leaves the potential to open the door in a close battle open a little bit more, which gives me a little bit more faith that if Sam has an 8 or a 7 for 9 day, he could still win. Whereas I don't think Josh can win unless he goes 9 for 9. And similarly with Cody, I have the least faith out of the 3 of them in Cody making lifts because of the track record.
Yeah, for sure.
Although the 2 meets before the 5 for 9 were both
8
8s.
for 9s,
So
exactly.
perhaps he gets back to that 8 for 9. Perhaps he was just unopposed at Night of Champions and he was just kind of YOLOing and who cares.
Yep.
And perhaps that means he's a bit more measured around his attempt selection
and
this
I will
time
say,
around.
I'm not counting Cody out at all. It's more so that perspective of what we've actually seen on paper.
Yeah.
I think that Cody could come in and actually just win.
100%.
I think he could just come in and have gotten a bit stronger and hit exactly what he needs, and he is incredibly strong. So we could see that, and I don't think that's impossible.
100%.
But that just remains to be seen. And then, I think with
he's
Josh and Sam, the only thing I'll say with Josh and Sam is I think that's a bit deceiving for us to look at 862 because that was at Worlds, wasn't it?
No, 855 was Worlds. 862.5 was
Nationals.
Nationals.
National, sorry, yeah. So I think that even just that ballpark of 855, 862, I just think it's a bit outdated for Josh, especially considering how relatively new he is to the class. And he seems to be making good progress. I don't think I've seen as much of him posting his top sets and that sort of thing. I think there has been some tumultuous phases of training, but I think it's safe to assume he's going to make a good progression on that 862.5. And again, I would expect that from Sam too. Like, I'd be quite surprised if Sam doesn't come in and subtotal PR by 5 to 10 kilos and then be able to take that extra 5 to 8 kilos on the pull that we think he has to win it. When I sort of say, Josh is my slight favorite, it's very slight because I think that they are very, very evenly matched across total. But like you've said, Sam does have that edge of the deadlift, which is an advantage, just in terms, again, of that precision of selections. And that's the tough part with Josh and his deadlift, is that he might come in and have an extremely consistent deadlift day and know exactly what to pick. But I think because he has had some days which are quite strong and then some days which are like surprisingly bad, that there is inherent risk in that, either in selecting something that's too light, leaving the door open, or missing. So I hope he's able to, I think it rides on, like you said, Josh going 9 for 9, particularly 3 from 3 on the deadlift. And it's an interesting point with the attempt jumps. I kind of like that angle. I think that there's a happy medium there where ultimately you need to do what you need to do to optimize your third, end of story. I don't love the narrative of, but if you miss your third, what do you end up with in your second? But I guess it can matter.
It can definitely matter.
It can matter.
Yeah.
With the bigger guys like this, with a third player, I don't think so as much. I think if Cody can do something robust, the attempt jumps aren't going to matter as much. I think that just where they end up is going to matter.
Yeah.
So,
I also always hope that everyone goes 9 for 9. And it's literally like whoever was better won, whoever was stronger won, whoever was smarter won.
Yeah.
But that's just not the case. I think like with Josh, with his deadlift, he's done 330, but the meets either side of the 330 were 317. And it kind of looked like there was a little bit of drop off between nationals and worlds. He missed 325 at worlds. So what I'm hoping for Josh, and what I think gives him the best chance, is if he returns to that 330 and he just makes a little bit more progress on squat and a little bit more bench has gone really well.
Bench has moved a lot. Like,
he's done 225, I think.
I think he's going to bench a fair bit more than 217.
I think he'll be looking at 225. He might get a chip there.
Yeah.
Squat. I think I think Cody will end up with a squat record. And, if Josh can put 5 kilos on what he did at Worlds, 5 to 7 on bench, and then get back to that deadlift that he did at Nationals, then I think he's going to be really tough to beat.
Yeah.
So, I'm super excited for this. Haven't picked my winner yet because I haven't picked like 5 classes or something yet, but obviously this chat will help. Tristan, nominated in third, 837.5. He did that at Worlds under huge pressure. His final pull was to put him in 5th in the world in the junior 120s, which is fucking awesome. He had a flawless 9 for 9 day, and he actually went 9 for 9 at Nationals, the comp before that. So he's shown his ability to not only execute, but also improve between comps. Like if you look at the lifts he did between the comp before Nationals, and then Worlds.
Would he be first year open?
He is first year open.
Yep.
There's improvement on all 3 lifts and total every single competition. So it's hard to really write Tristan off.
Yeah, you can't write him off. I think that the situation we have here is there is a sizable gap between him and then Josh and Sam. And then there's a perceived joining to that cohort of Cody if he can execute. So it does sort of position Tristan in this place where he will probably have a really excellent day. He'll probably add kilos to his total. He'll probably go 8 or 9 for 9. He'll probably total 850 plus, but they'll probably just be a little bit under the top 2, maybe even the top 3, depending how Cody goes. And that's like just not a knock at all. It's like really impressive.
Yeah, totally.
It means like he's an up and coming fresh at a junior into open. He's going to be right on the tail of the best opens in the 120s. And like he's just a future star who's already doing incredibly, incredibly well. But even if you just rewind like 1 to 2 years, the total he's doing now, right, would have put him in excellent stead for the win. So, it's a pretty remarkable thing that he's doing, and I would expect him to have a really great day, but just to be a little bit shy of those top 2, maybe even the top 3, depending how things shake out.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Like Sam and Josh are kind of like the most likely to be first. Cody is definitely a chance, but I think given the track record and given sort of the more recent improvement, he's probably a little less likely, but like I said, definitely a chance with the huge squat and the huge deadlift. And then Tristan's a little bit below that. And then we've got the 5th place battle is actually going to be awesome between Taj, Charles, Daniel, Samisi, and Will. or within 30 kilos of nominated. Taj has made great progress since going up from 105 to 120. The 878 he did at Night of Champions was with, I believe, a 20 kilo jump.
787. Yep.
A 20 kilo jump from his second to third deadlift. I'm pretty sure he attempted 350. So he could be well and truly into the 800s. I think Charles will be well and truly into the 800s. The 785 he did was a missed 15 kilo jump on his final deadlift, which literally just slipped out of his hands at the top. He's made big progress on squat and deadlift and a little bit on bench. So, I would expect 820 from Charles. Daniel, I haven't seen a lot of his training, but he is very strong, big deadlifter. Sabisi, I know, was not happy with his performance at Night of Champions, but has been working really hard to improve.
That 775 would have been at 105 for Daniel.
Okay, so that gives him even more sort of momentum and more force behind him being sort of in that 800 range as well. And I think Samisi as well, I think he squatted 290 at Night of Champions, and he's done a 300 double in training. He's making great progress switching from conventional to sumo too, so we'll see how that goes.
There's going to be a bunch of these lads potentially sailing past 800.
Yeah, and then Will McCallanan from Canberra, he, I think he sandbagged a little bit to just hit the QT because that's exactly what the QT was. Big squatter, he's done 300. So it'll be interesting to see what improvements he can make and whether he can sort of get himself to the high 700s, maybe even that 800.
Beautiful.
Cool. So we've got 2 classes to go. We've got the 84 plus women. Now, I think this is like a big 2 and then everyone else. We've got Natalie, Lucy, Rebecca. Do you know how to pronounce that name?
I'll just say Adele. Adelgisa?
Adele, Lauren, and Annabelle. So we've got 6 women here. Like I said, this is really a battle of the top 2. And similar to Kana and Tanis, it's like 2 of the best lifters pretty much in the country in the same weight class, which makes for great battles, which I'm really, really excited about. This is another class that I just haven't decided my winner yet. What's your read on Nat versus Lucy?
I think they're both amazing. I think that Nat has really impressed me this prep because it's obvious that Lucy's made a lot of strides, and I think that she got a lot closer to Nat at Worlds than maybe a lot of people suspected. But I think the response there in Nat's training has been really impressive. I think she squatted 260. I know she pulled 285, and that looked pretty comfortable. And then she benched maybe 135 or something like that. So she's done really, really well in training. I think the only question mark will be, does she translate that to the platform? I would expect yes. She generally does show up nicely on the day. I think it's going to matter how Nat's attempts are laid out a little bit. I know that there's been a little bit of a notorious smaller jump from like that second to that third because often it's been like a bit more of a record hunt or something like that. Let's secure this record and then let's go for something bigger.
Last year was securing best lifter on second deadlift.
Yeah, best lifter, world records at World, stuff like that, right? So there's a lot going on there, and I think that the priorities will shift a little bit more. So I would expect to see some different sort of attempt strategies there. And then you got Lucy, who has also seemingly had a really good prep. I was talking with Shania, and I know that all 3 lifts have gone really, really well. They're using a strategy that seems actually a bit similar to Sam's sort of programming strategy, where they've been doing a lot more of that robust middle work that has been PRing very consistently. By all reports, she's been managing her hectic schedule very, very well, with a sort of like night shifts and stuff like that.
She's a correctional officer, isn't she?
I believe so.
Far out.
So I also expect her to, squat up around that 260 mark, bench around that 150 mark, and then, deadlifts, I think, might be her most improved lift from my perspective. When I saw her comparison of her 250 training pool from the last prep, where she went from, this giga hard 250 to quite a nice 257.5 after traveling and everything. And then pulling this 250 recently that looked how I would suspect 235 or 240 would have looked in the previous prep. It's very impressive to see how things are moving, how that holds up at the top end. We're going to have to see. I think the way this plays out is Lucy puts her head down, hits 9 for 9 lifts, hits a PR total, and demands a very big pull from Nat. I would expect the upper 280s, maybe even 290 to be required for Nat to take the win back if Lucy's able to come in and execute that really smooth, strong day. I think that Nat still probably has the edge in that regard because she's made such great progress since the last sort of battle, and then her deadlift is looking particularly strong. Like it's kind of a bit of a sky's the limit thing with that deadlift, where it's like she could come in and pull like around that, like 285 mark, which would be a 12 kilo PR in competition. Let's just be real. Or she could pull more. It's a bit tough to know because it did look so good. But we know as well that with those high performance moments, you can have some really good training days, and then the competition days are a bit more normal after squatting and things like that. So my expectation is that it's going to be very, very close. That Lucy's done a great job of sort of catching up, but Nat has really had this nice surge. So my expectation is going to come down to the wire. I personally give my slight edge to Lucy. I know that you're sort of sitting more on the Nat side, and yeah, it's really just a case of leaning. I think that I also sort of lean to the underdog a lot of the time, which Lucy is. She's the up and comer, and I think that she's shown that she's very consistent on the platform. Not that Nat hasn't, but you're looking at 9 for 9, 8 for 9, 9 for 9. Nat's got 7 for 9, 8 for 9, 8 for 9. I think that matters, but it will come down to the last deadlift, and Nat's going to have that power to make that choice. I also think there's going to be choices to be made potentially, depending how all the other classes have gone, as to securing the prime or the first place person to be considered in secondary selection for Worlds. Because at the end of the day, it'd be great to see both these women on the world stage. They do extremely well at the world level. But if it's a big enough jump, depending how things are paced, reaching for first and missing could mean losing out on that position potentially. I think that's a consideration that has to be made. So I think there's going to be some choices.
I think to talk on that point, I think Jacob does take quite small jumps compared to what you or I would select.
Yeah.
So I don't see a way where even if Nat doesn't win, that she doesn't end up with one of those secondary spots. I think especially because some of the women who we think will win have said they don't want to go to Worlds. Liz, Britt, Shay. There's 3. So there's a few spots. So even if they're not second, they may be
you're right.
third or fourth on that. So I think it's very, very unlikely that they both don't end up at Worlds. Like I think it's extremely likely they're both there.
Like if those women you just listed were going, that point would probably hold up better. But I think you're right. They're gonna actually just gonna be able to pull for the win and not worry about it.
And also Teresa not in the mix. Like we might not have a 57 who hits that.
Yep.
Whereas both of these women will hit the QT by a lot and, have that advantage over the secondaries.
Yep.
I think if we look at Nat's most recent comp, squatted 255, actually missed it on depth on her second attempt and retook. It was quite comfy. She's done 262.5 in training. So I would expect that she's in the 260 to 265 range on the platform. So let's give her 7.5 to 10 kilos there. Bench, I would expect 135, so she's got another 5 there. And deadlift,
potentially 12. Yeah.
And deadlift, who knows? It could be 15,
plus.
Could be 20.
Yep.
So I think that Nat actually has a chance to go about 690 on her best possible day. You said I was leaning towards Nat. I think, generally speaking, I lean towards bigger deadlifter because I think, it's just such a big advantage to be able to pick the exact number. It's like this number or, it might be 5 kilos below what you were going to do anyway. I think that's such a huge advantage. And I also think that Nat has just progressed, as you mentioned. Like she's just progressed more than probably what we would have expected.
Totally. I agree.
In that short time period as someone who's so experienced and already so elite, because I think part of it is Lucy's on her tail.
Yeah, well,
and we see that rising tide floats all boats, whatever the saying is.
Yep.
2 birds in the hand.
Please.
Not again. We see that sort of fire gets put under someone's ass and it forces you to be better.
Like, I'll be honest, my expectation after watching those two go at it at Worlds was, I was like, oh, look how close Lucy is. I imagine that she's going to keep progressing at this rate, and she looks like she's, going to go past Nat. That was my
100%.
That was my impression for sure. Which again, that's never to knock the other person. Like, Nat's an amazing athlete. Credit to her that she has done exactly what you just said and responded beautifully to the place where you should absolutely be considering her to be putting up a formidable total and to pull for the win as a likely scenario. Again, I lean to Lucy in this scenario because, you know, like I said, I like to see the underdog get into it. I think that I relate to her in some ways with regard to like the outlay. Like she's not that deadlift specialist. Cool. So it's almost that. And like I'll say that, like I'm relatively objective, but there's a subjectivity to it as well. It's like, oh cool, go Lucy, you know, like, but as well, and that's just like a G, like her pulling 285 in training, looking like she could have pulled 290, 295, maybe even, like, will she just run away with it? You know, and I think that I'd like to see either of those things happen. I think it'd be cool to see Lucy come in and hit a PR total and Nat to just clean up because she's just gassed it.
That is exactly what I expect. Like I expect that Lucy's sort of like high 670s to 680, and then I expect that Nat's just good enough to beat her. Like that's really what I expect here. Like
I could see that. I think that the only question mark again is just around like the strategy of how that comp plan is laid out, and the thing that always goes through my mind, which is like the lifters hitting what they hit in training. Okay, well they did the thing. You know, trust that's going to be there, perhaps even more. But then that question mark in my head of like, will we see that or will we see something less? You know, like there's always that question mark in my mind, you know, but then you have to swing the other way too, which is like, will we see more? You know, like 273 to 285, that's a massive thing. But will we see even more than that? And if we do, of course, as a scrub, you know, at that point, really is.
Yeah, I think with Nat, like, something that we've already touched on with other lifters is like that strength has been there, that plus 620, 630 strength has been there for a few years now, and it's a little bit more reliable. I also think, to talk on the similar point with Josh versus Sam, Nat does take smaller jumps, so she probably can afford a miss and still be within range of a pull for the win. Where I don't think, I know Lucy takes huge jumps. She jumped from 230 to 250 last year on her third squat. If you miss that, you're probably done.
It swings both ways, doesn't it?
I think like it's a hard one to say like, oh, small jumps better than big jumps.
Well, what it is this in my mind is like there is a situation where Lucy taking the bigger jumps is the reason that she wins because she's able to optimize the top end because she hasn't tired herself out throughout the day. And there's a situation where Lucy hits a decent day and Nat taking smaller jumps and misses a lift but still wins. And the reason that was the case is because the jumps are smaller. Yeah. So those circumstances can all kind of arise. On average, like I just lean towards like the first situation where you just focus on your day and optimize it as best you can and take the jumps that just make for that best top end.
Yes.
But as well, the more you get used to those smaller jumps, does it nerf the top end as much as some might think? You know, probably not. So yeah, I think like 6 to 1, half a dozen the other almost.
That's where I lean with Nat in a positive. It's a positive for her to take small jumps because she's done it so many times and come back. Like she did 2.6, 8.5 for the record and for best lifter last year in the second attempt, and then jumped to 275. Like it's a very small jump. And she locked it out, got 2 reds for like soft lockout. But it wasn't a strength issue. It wasn't a fatigue issue.
Wasn't it though?
Oh, I don't think it was.
You can't say that.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so at the end of the day, if she'd done 262.5, she might have locked out the 275. And if it comes down to something like that, the small jump cooked her. I mean, you have to say that.
Maybe, yes. But also, like,
it's circumstantial.
She did it again at Worlds. Like, she took a very small jump the previous year at Worlds and that year at Worlds. Like, she's got a track record for being able to back up a big attempt.
Yes, I agree. So a lot of lifters will come out and hit like a hard second and maybe they can't even hit that same lift again. So yes, she does have that ability to like come out and do it again. But the thing I would just say is that it's always circumstantial. So in the situation where she's that far ahead, it never matters. But in the situation where 2.5 is the difference, the heavy second makes a difference in almost every circumstance. You know, so if it's going to be that close, I do think it will matter. But the question mark is she pulling 280, 282 where it's going to matter? Or is she pulling 290, 292 where it doesn't even matter? And that's where I think like anyone should like, you know, not even in this circumstance, but like a comp plan works in a circumstance where you got like no one around you that's really that close you have to worry about. It's not that valid to me, you know, because you have like all these choices and like the stakes just really aren't there. I think that when you have those circumstances where you have to find out like what these little decisions, what ripples they cause to the top end, and those little tiny changes actually make a difference to eking out those final kilos. I think that's something that really is worth thinking about, because when you get to that world level, you know, that's something that really becomes apparent. So I hope actually that whoever wins those decisions actually decide that. I'd love to see that.
Sure.
Because I think that's what I enjoy about national level events and this sport is when it comes down to the wire, not just of athlete ability, but actually of the back end stuff, coach's plan, tactics, all these little things that produce that potential outcome. It's like, okay, this happened, the ricochet over to this caused a loss, and then this person comes through and wins. Like, I kind of like seeing that in a sense, just one way or the other, you know? So I would like to see the game plan almost be like what causes the outcome. But I think it'll either be that or it'll be in that runaway.
Yeah. I think to talk on, look, to give my argument a bit of strength at Worlds, I mentioned earlier, missed 255 on depth, retook it, got it. Second attempt deadlift 268.5, got it. Third attempt deadlift 273, got it. So she's got that ability to have two heavy squats and two heavy deadlifts in the same day.
100% agree.
Which I think in a battle like this is a strength. It means she can probably risk a heavier second to secure kilos, take a little bit of a risk on the third by taking a bigger jump, just to have that like insurance policy on the second, which I'm not big on.
No. Like I
just think in this particular scenario,
like this is one of those unique cases where we kind of go against what we would normally say.
Yeah,
because
like usually this kind of case,
front runner who's progressed and who on like a 95 to 98% day can win.
And usually this kind of thing would be kind of preserved for lifters like Vicky, who would take a small jump anyway because she's such a lightweight female, not a super heavyweight female.
It's a unique capacity of a super heavyweight female.
Yeah.
You would more often expect someone lifting those kinds of weights to have like one shot in the day at a high exertion, but she goes against the grain in that sense. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like I just said, with the progress she's potentially made from training into the competition now, to hit like the high, like close to 100%, but just shy of it on those seconds, she could win with that.
Yeah.
That's what
exactly
you're kind of getting at.
Exactly right. Yeah.
It's to little loss, you know, securing those kilos and then potentially pushing them further forward only applies pressure to Lucy, where she has to perform perhaps beyond her means and starts missing. So, yeah,
Totally.
I think it'll be a really cool battle. I think after speaking with you on it, I'm more on the fence now. I really like both the ladies. I think they're both really hard workers, super kind. And I hope they both have a great day.
And they're great friends as well, which is cool.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just going to be really cool. I hope we just see both of them just do some crazy shit. Like, let's go. You know, just get after it. And whoever wins, fantastic. The other one goes to Worlds 2, rematch.
It was one of the most enjoyable sessions last year at Nationals. And Lucy wasn't even particularly close to Nat yet.
Yeah.
It was like, holy shit, Lucy just got a 250.
Yep.
Like that almost seemingly came out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And then she benched 140 and it was like, holy shit. And now she's way better than that.
Yeah.
And Nat's better. And it's like, it's going to be very fun. Would you like to touch on the rest of the field here?
Let me pull it up. Okay, so Adele, Lauren, Annabelle, sorry if I'm stuffing your name up there, Adelgisa. 475 and then 467.5 for the other two women.
Sorry, we skipped Rebecca.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, sorry.
I think Rebecca's just pretty much a shoe-in for the bronze here.
Yeah, so Rebecca Blanken, 512.5. Yeah, so she sits well below the top two, but then well above fourth place nominated. But again, hard to know sometimes, again, with the nominated totals. So there's a potential that there's some hidden progress or different sort of nominated totals with the fourth, fifth, sixth here. And we have some kind of battle for third, which could be cool. Keeping in mind that Rebecca hit 7 for 9 at her last comp and made a tidy 7.5 kilo progression on the previous comp, although hitting less lifts. So I would expect some good progress there and probably sits tidily in that third place, all things credit equal. And then the other three ladies as well, quite closely bunched in for the next best. So yeah, I think that's going to be great. Obviously 2 front runners and then the rest of the ladies having a crack at their respective places as well.
Yep. So good luck to all the 84 plus women. And the final class, lifting on his own, 120 plus, Mr. Jackson Stubberfield, nominated 885. Last three totals, 880, 885, and 900. What are we thinking about Mr. Stubbs here?
I haven't seen a ton of Jackson's training. I saw a couple deadlift PBs, rep work PBs. I saw, I think, a 220 bench.
225.
225, yep. And I know that he's also hit some rep PRs on the squat coming back from knee surgery. Is that right? So I think he's looking very promising. I think if we sort of just assess that bench press and we look back at that 900 day where he went 350, 210, 340, if he's able to get that 225 and hit some mixture of, that 690 between the squat and the deadlift, we're going to end up with, somewhere between a 910 and a 920 performance, which would be really awesome to see. I think the international QT is 910, World's QT. So I definitely think that, he's in a good spot to be pushed by that QT. And as someone who is at the moment by himself in that weight class, I think that having an element of pressure, I hope to see that cause him to perform to a really high level. I hope to see him pushing up towards 950 in the future. But as well, coming back from like a knee surgery is, always a tough ask. But I think to be doing so well, like I said, with some rep PRs on the squat, it definitely suggests that he's in a really good, healthy spot. And, just to reiterate, to be hitting 225 in training and quite well, it was
nice,
an awfully hard press. I would expect that that's within his means on the day. So definitely hoping to see a PR total from him. Definitely hoping to see him hit the World's QT. And I'd expect that that's a pretty reasonable ask for someone who's as strong as him, has the track record that he has, and who's been prepping as well as he has. So this is going to come down to hitting 8 or 9 lifts, most likely. I think he can do it on 8 or 9 lifts. And yeah, probably getting that nice boost from that bench press and then maybe alleviating where there isn't kilos at the moment. So maybe the squat isn't quite there because of the surgery. I think that's okay, considering the deadlift looks to be at all-time strength and the bench press looks to be at all-time strength. So that's where I sit on him. Again, haven't seen a ton of his training, but I've seen those top sets, and I think it looks good.
Yeah, so when he did the 900, I think the biggest thing he will be looking at is totally 910. Like, I think he wants to go to Worlds. That's what he needs to go to Worlds. He's done 900, so 910 is within reason. Like, it's not crazy. He's not going to be taking Hail Marys. All the attempts he takes are going to be
reasonable lifts.
Smart. When he did 900, it was 350, 210, 340, which was only a PR on squat of the 3 lifts. So he's added to the bench. He's done 215 in comp. Like we said, he's done 225 in training. He's got some kilos there on the bench. He's deadlifted 342.5, which was at last year's nationals to hit the World's QT last year. So he's been in this situation before where he needed 885 last time, and he clutched up and he got that third deadlift on that day. So, I think we're going to see the same thing here. His deadlift looks to be progressing. So I think we'll see more than that 342.5. I think we'll see closer to 350. And then he's kind of in a position where he can almost
take less on the
sandbag the squat a smidge.
That's what I'm expecting is a little bit less on the squat, a little bit more on the deadlift, and maybe about 10 to 12 more on the bench press, and he's there.
That's exactly how I'm seeing it. It's he can kind of not risk the knee with a huge third squat and just take 10 kilos under what he's done, get those 10 or 15 back from the bench, and then fill the rest in with the deadlift at the end. That's kind of how I see this playing out for Jackson. I'm excited to watch him lift. It's, in my opinion, the funnest powerlifting is enormous squats by big people. So I'll always be super stoked to see someone squat 330 plus, and that'll be where my eyes are during the big boys and girls session.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Wow.
That's everyone.
Whew.
How long was that? 3 hours 24 minutes.
Dude.
Good effort. All right. We will check in with you in a couple of weeks for a recap show. Hopefully it's not 3 hours 35 minutes. And thank you everyone for listening. And
good luck to all the competitors.
Yeah, good luck to all the competitors. If we think we've slept on someone, let us know.
Sort us out.
Please let me know, and I'll share it on my story, and hopefully they do well.
Full disrespect. No disrespect.
Yeah, all the disrespect. Let us know if we've missed anyone. Let us know if you think our predictions are wrong. All publicity is good publicity, and we'll see all of you who are going to be there in Perth. And good luck to everyone, and ciao.